And we also have CSA Partnerships for Health, which is when doctors are able to prescribe their patients fresh fruits and vegetables, and then our CSA Partnerships for Health like coordinator, manager have set up with different farms, and they're able to provide produce for those people. And those are all of our programs. So welcome to the farm. I hope you got to look around. It's really starting to come alive.
Thank you, Bailey. Bailey will join us later, too, for one of the sessions. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm sorry about that. My name is Sarah Giles. I'm a project manager with Oregon's Kitchen Table. And there's a whole team of us that you'll hear from throughout the next couple days. We'll do a little bit more of a introduction. But we first wanted to do, I know you've been doing some mixing and mingling informally, but we had a prompt that we were asking you to reflect on, where we hope we'll do another kind of mix and mingle to get people talking to each other and to set the tone for the next 3 days. The prompt is up here. Our projector was not working. My apologies. So you have to look at our handwritten prompt, which is asking you to tell us about a time you felt your opinion mattered and what made you feel that way. We had some note cards that were at the front or on the tables that you can jot a few notes down if you haven't done that yet. And then I'm going to play a little music, and we're not doing musical chairs. We're not doing freeze dance, but I'll play the music, and everyone will get up and move around. And when I stop the music, you pick someone to share with, okay? So take a few minutes. Let me get my music queued up. Okay, I'm going to start the music. I know you might still be writing. That's okay. We're going to start with Esperanza Spalding and City of Roses, one of our Portland, Oregon musicians. Thank you. Thank you for trying with us.
Thank you for coming. My name is Wendy Willis. I'm the director of Oregon's Kitchen Table, and we're partnering with the City of Portland, the Office of Civic Life, and many others to make this happen today. And we'll introduce people as we proceed. But first of all, it's like when you have a party and people come, it's always a good day. So we appreciate you already for doing that. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Commissioner Dan Ryan, who just ran away. Commissioner Ryan was elected to City Council in 2020 to fill late Commissioner Nick Fish's seat. Commissioner Ryan is both honored and deeply humbled to serve his hometown of Portland. In 2020, Commissioner Ryan was assigned oversight of the Joint Office of Homeless Services, the Bureau of Development Services, the Portland Housing Bureau, and the Portland Children's Levy. And for those of you who aren't from Portland, our guest will explain all those things to you later. In January 2023, Commissioner Ryan began serving as the Commissioner of Culture and Livability, overseeing the Office of Community and Civic Life, Office of Equity and Human Rights, Portland Parks and Recreation, and the Portland Children's Levy. In addition, Commissioner Ryan is the City of Portland's Arts Liaison. Commissioner Ryan leads steadfastly in pursuit of thoughtfully community-shared solutions to the many complex challenges that Portlanders face. So, Commissioner Ryan, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. I don't want to stay seated, but do I do this whole thing?
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, if you take the whole thing, because the folks out in television land can't hear you.
Oh, okay, I'll behave. All right. I need bumpers, right? Hey, it's good to see everybody. My name is Dan, and okay, can we just talk about how beautiful it is? It's so, oh my God, doesn't it just make everything seem better? So, sorry I'm a little bit late. There was more traffic today. Perhaps everyone's out doing things. I actually wanted to start off by asking like who you are, not like I'm going to get everyone's going to stand up and say who they are, but just to get a sense of who's in the room. How many of you would identify yourself as active in your neighborhoods? I'd say I'm too. And you can vote more than once. How many of you are active with your small business, or a small business owner? Yay, we have a few. We have actually 4. Great. Portland is a town of small businesses. How many people here are connected to and active with and work for a community organization, nonprofit? Okay. I think you already qualified just by the way you asked the question. So that's the majority so far, and everyone's active in their neighborhood. How about how many people here work for the city of Portland? Okay, smaller number. I think I covered all the categories. My point is, sorry, that was a real miss. All right, that's Portland. Portland's all of these things and more. It's all these sectors and more. And when I had the opportunity, when the mayor said, will you take on this assignment? I said yes, but I said, I think we need to press a restart and make sure that we know that it's an and equation. It's neighborhood groups, it's the community organizations, it's all of the sectors that are in this room right now. And I think that's what's important, is to establish that as we move forward. When the voters were pretty clear that they wanted a new form of government, I really think they were frustrated because things just aren't going the way they wish it was. And I don't think anyone out there, no matter what sector, no matter where you go, will tell you they're frustrated. Some would say because they're paying a lot more to live here than ever before, and they're receiving services from government that aren't very satisfying. Some would give other remarks where they just don't feel like they have access because they email, they call city offices, and they don't get a response. Our customer service isn't very good, is what you heard over and over again. So as the commissioner that was asked to take on this assignment of community and civic life under cultural and livability, for me it was like, okay, I heard the voters, we're gonna have 4 districts. And so how can we build some scaffolding around those 4 districts, which will be revealed sometime, is it September-ish? I'm looking at you. Yeah, you were supposed to know the answer to that, right? I think it's September-ish that we have a commission. There's a lot of commissions at the City of Portland, and they're working on that right now. And so it will be really important that as we move forward, that we build that in the 4 districts so that when people do want to be closer to the government, there's some infrastructure there. In terms of community and civic life, the good people I've met there, thank you, the few that are here, it's to get us back to being a place where we are definitely the objective convener, that we are there to make sure that the people that live in Portland, work in Portland, play in Portland, have access and have an objective on-ramp to engagement. We're not coming at you with our ideology. We're not coming at you with our regulation. We will invite those people to the table. We will objectively facilitate that dialogue between those in the neighborhoods and those groups. But it's really building that stewardship component that I think people are craving in Portland. And it's not the old neighborhood associations. It's not whatever it's been. It's a restart. And it's a chance to know it's all of this. And as somebody that came into a position like this from community, doing a lot of cat herding, the only reason we got education results is because we brought in all sectors. We got clear that, guess what, almost all the sectors had the same goals in mind. They had some really different ways of wanting to go about it. That's great. That's called creative tension. Bring that into the room, figure it out, but let's get clear that we have some goals in Portland. We have to be focused on those, and I'll just say this to end. I think there's been, I'm an idealistic thinker, I'm an optimist, but ideology without clear, crisp action plans don't get you anywhere. And we've kind of been suffering from a couple decades of that type of motion. And we give a lot of airtime for that. To what end? Have the disparities increased? Absolutely, because we haven't been focused on what the concrete action plan is to measure success and for all of us to be behind that. And we're supposed to have great creative tension about how we get there, but we're supposed to include everybody as we move forward. And we need to be the city that gets results once again. And so I'm just delighted to be in a transition form of government. I've always liked change. I'm kind of on the scale when you do those tests. Change, like what else is there? So it's really comfortable for me right now to be in a place serving my hometown, let's face it, at the end of my career, that really wants to be a part of helping us build that authentic community engagement. Because when I looked at whoever prepared these, it was great, but I just knew I couldn't read all of them, and it would not be fair to everybody. But I want to thank you, because there was one stat in here. The last time the city created a new community engagement framework was 1974. I was in middle school. That's not a good idea. So we're definitely here with, thank you for guiding us through this talk today, this PEP Talk. But know that we're onto something. And as we launch into the new form of government, keep coming back and help us build it. It's from all good change comes from the micro communities out. And so when the mayor asked me for this assignment, I said, parks, arts, neighborhoods, yeah, that's where it's at. When I decide to live somewhere, visit somewhere, it's that vibe that you get from those local communities. That's what makes you excited to be a part of a city. And those are also the microeconomies that build the prosperity of a community as well. And so I will get out of the way. I will turn it over to the acting, what's your title right now? Acting director, sorry, I ask you that all the time because they used to be my communication strategist in my office, so I miss that. But can you tell? No, TJ McHugh took on a really important assignment, and that is to take a level setting opportunity to do this all together so we can move forward as a team. So thank you for having me here. I'm going to I don't want to stay up here. Do I have to stay up here? Okay. I'm going to go meander and listen and kind of hang out with all of you for a little bit. And I'll turn this over to you, TJ. Thanks for including me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
One of the greatest things about working with Commissioner Ryan and working on his communication strategy is that you've taken all my talking points, so I appreciate that.
And I didn't even look at the
And you didn't. It was great. It's fantastic.
That's the worst part of it.
Thank you guys for being here. As the commissioner said, the last time we really did a deep dive into how our communities engage with the city was 50 years ago. Our population was half of what it was that it is today. And our city has evolved. It's a lot more diverse. There's a lot more needs. There's a lot more issues that are going on with our city. So I think it's very important that we do a reset with how we can better engage with our communities. Historically, that's been through the neighborhood associations. We know that we have to do a reset with the city and the neighborhood associations because, quite frankly, the last 6 years hasn't been great between the city and them. We also need to figure out how to balance that with our large nonprofits that provide services and how we also partner with our small nonprofit organizations and the money that we grant them to do events. So it's no longer one organization against another organization. It's actually about coming together and looking about how we can build healthy neighborhoods. And it's going to take everybody to do that. Portland is not going to be successful and come out of the ditch we're in without having every neighborhood be healthy. When I took this job, one of the old commissioners, Mike Lindbergh, reached out to me, was talking to me about giving me his insights. And the one thing that he told me that has really stuck with me and has really made me think about how we want to engage, he said, you don't have to move to live in a better neighborhood. And I think that really sits with me. And I think that as we're doing our engagement through this next couple of days and today, think about that, how we can build a better neighborhood by staying where we are and actually investing our time and energy. That's all I've got. So back to Wendy.
That's all you got. Thank you, TJ, and thanks, Commissioner Ryan. This is one of the great things about Portland, right? Is we all get to sit together and learn together. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through what the next few days will look like. But first, I want to introduce you to some of the people behind the scenes. As you know, an event like this over 3 days takes a lot of folks. And I'll have them raise their hands, and we want you to know them both because we want to give them credit for all the work that they've done, but also if you have any needs over the next few days, you know who to go to. So Oregon's Kitchen Table team, if you can raise your hand. Thanks everybody for being here. Oregon's Kitchen Table, while you have your hand up, I'm just going to talk, is a statewide community engagement program that's housed at Portland State University in the National Policy Consensus Center. And we'd be happy to talk to you more about that during the breaks. So we have Damon back there, Sarah, I don't know where Sarah is, Roz is there, Corey, Nusat, and hi, there you are, and Megan. So that's the Oregon's Kitchen Table team. This Center for Public Service team, also from PSU, Margaret, Diane, there's Margaret there, Diane, Kim, and Neil, who may not be here. Oh, there we go. Hello, hi to everybody. Thank you so much for being here. That team is working on the report from these days, so there are recorders. You'll see them lurking. Be kind to them. And then, in addition to to who you already met from the city, we also have our tremendous partners, Perla, right here, Shelby, who might be out front, I think. You may have met Shelby at the door, and Gloria, who I don't know if she's here right now, but we'll introduce you to Gloria when she gets here, and of course, Commissioner Ryan and TJ. Oh, thanks, Sarah. So a couple things, just a little bit of housekeeping about what these days look like. They're kind of ritualized days, and so this PEP Talks is really our opportunity to learn from some folks that we know from outside of Portland, and then look at those learnings inside a Portland context and then apply them. And as we, the world of democracy innovation is exploding, both globally in the United States and here in Portland. And I see tons of people in this room who are have a lot of experience and expertise. So it's going to be an amazing conversation among people who really care about these things. So the way that pattern will work is that we'll hear from our guest experts, who you'll be introduced to in a moment. And then we'll hear what we're calling stories from Portland. So then some Portlanders, so like in this instance, some Portlanders from East Portland will share some of their stories, and then we'll sort of do a little bit of application of what that looks like. Like what we heard. This is what we heard from our guest experts. This is what we heard from Portlanders, and how does that look like we can apply it in our own community? And you'll have a chance to work on those questions every day at the end of the day. So we'll start with information, and then we'll do some workshopping, and then we'll carry the information that you generated today into tomorrow. So there's 3 days of this. It's a sort of patterned way of doing these exercises. One thing to know is that the same people who are here today might not be here tomorrow. So we're going to have to do some work to make sure that everybody feels like they belong and are part of the group. And so I trust that we can do that together. Is Sarah hiding back there? No, she's right here. So the one thing is we'd like to just talk about some community agreements for the room and for the entire PEP Talks. Ordinarily, we would do this collectively, and we would create these community agreements together, but given that we have a short amount of time and a lot of work to do, we thought we would propose them, and if you either can't live with one of these community agreements or you have one you would like to add, please raise your hand and we'll do that, because they are all of ours. So the first is, if you can't see it, is bring your full attention. I already see no one's on their phone. It's so weird. Thank you. Listen to learn, and share generously. This is it's a sort of an exciting learning space, and so we can do that together. If you have a question, ask it, because probably somebody else does too. Be mindful of your impact, not just your intent. So I guess that's a take a breath and think before you speak kind of caution. Oh, Sarah, do you mind? Sorry about that. And just so you all know who are in the room, we actually have probably almost twice the size of this room who are registered virtually, so we're trying to be attentive to those folks by staying on the mics and those kinds of things as well. So of course, take care of your own needs and support others who are also need to take care of their needs. Don't leave anyone behind, and that's sort of, since we are a morphing community over the next 3 days, if all of us can work to catch people up or talk to them about what we learned the days before, that will create a sense of belonging quickly. Seek connection with one another. One of the things that we heard as we were planning this is that people really want a time to have some fellowship with one another, and so we'd love to see that happen. And then offer appreciations freely. We at Oregon's Kitchen Table, we love appreciations. You'll hear us offer appreciations a lot, and we hope that we can all do that for each other. And then bring joy and seek joy, because that's what it's all about, right? So are there any here that you can't live with? Or that you want, is there anything you'd like to add? Yes? Say it again. Find compromise. Does everybody feel okay about that? Adding that? Okay, find compromise. We'll do it. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, let's go. So thanks very much. I want to introduce Damon. Damon Isaiah Turner's right here. He's going to lead us into the next section. Yeah, that's fine.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us from both far and wide and near. I have the pleasure to introducing to you our four guest public service practitioners who will each share with you a bit about their experiences engaging in a particular community engagement project. And they will also share a potential lesson that they would like to share with Portland that they may have gleaned from their personal experience. So if you don't mind, as I read your background bio, if you wouldn't mind coming up and sitting in one of the chairs. We're going to start with Mr. Wilkes. Andrew Wilkes served as Generation Citizens Chief Policy and Advocacy Officer, where he leads JC's thought leadership, coalition building, and policy initiatives as a part of the national leadership team. Andrew comes to this role with nearly 10 years of experience in public policy, advocacy, and community organizing, particularly among congregations and community-based organizations. Prior to joining GC, Andrew was the executive director of the Drum Major Institute, a social change organization founded by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In that capacity, he executed public affairs events in Dallas, Texas, and Washington, D.C. to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, established the beloved Community Initiative, a national resource on spirituality and social justice for faith-based communities, and relaunched the national renowned Marketplace of Ideas Forum to bring policy ideas to an audience of changemakers, policy professionals, and nonprofit leaders. Andrew also serves on the board of directors for the Labor Religion Coalition of New York State and Habitat for Humanity, New York State. Please welcome Andrew Wilkes to Oregon. And next up, we have Bryna Helfer, who is the Assistant County Manager and Director of Communications and Public Engagement for Arlington County in Virginia. Prior to joining Arlington County, she was Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Engagement for the U.S. Department of Transportation and has served as the Senior Advisor to the Transportation Secretary on Accessibility and Workforce Development. Bryna has more than 30 years of experience initiating, leading, and facilitating interagency coordination, program development, strategic planning, program evaluation, and systems change initiatives. She has a long history of coalition building at the federal, state, and local levels and is known for her ability to forge partnerships between governmental programs and community-based organizations. Bryna is active in the Highland Park Overley Knolls Neighborhood Association. She has served on the Arlington Aquatics Committee and the board of directors of the Independence Center of Northern Virginia. Please welcome Bryna to Oregon. Thank you. Dr. Julia Carboni is an award-winning, community-engaged scholar and leader with expertise in using collaboration and asset-based community development to improve the lives and well-being of communities. She conducts research on organizational collaboration and collaborative philanthropy with an emphasis on veteran-serving networks, food systems, and community development. She teaches courses on collaboration, community development, nonprofit management, and fund development. Julia is currently an associate professor at the Syracuse University Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, where she also chairs the Maxwell School Citizenship and Civic Engagement Program and serves as the Collaborative Governance Research Director for the program for the advancement of research on conflict and collaboration. In these roles, she develops and maintains relationships with community partners to advance community and Maxwell School goals. Julia serves on the board of directors for organizations including the Association for Research on Nonprofit Organizations and Voluntary Action, the University Network for Collaborative Governance, the Food Bank of Central New York, and the Syracuse Onondaga Food Systems Alliance. Please welcome Dr. Carbone. Felipe Rey is a founding partner and project coordinator at the Democratic Innovation Laboratory, IDEMOS, which is part of the International Network Democracy R&D. Throughout his academic career, he has taught public law and legal theory at universities in Colombia and Spain and was a visiting researcher at the Center for Human Values at the University of Princeton. Felipe designed the Iterant Citizens Assembly model, a connected series of citizens' assemblies that took place in 2020 and 2021 in the city of Bogota, sponsored by the Bogota City Council and its Public Innovation Laboratory, Demo Lab. The Iterant Citizen Assembly is the first model from the Global South to be recognized by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development as an institutionalization alternative. IDEMOS has developed important projects, such as the Mini Public for Social Dialogue in Colombia that took place in 2020, one of the first deliberations in Colombia using random selection of citizens. IDEMOS has signed agreements with the Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy to disseminate and strengthen deliberative democracy and participated as a convener of the Spanish language cluster in the Global Assembly on the Climate Crisis in 2021. IDEMOS, together with Democracy R&D, also leads the global project, The New Frontiers of Deliberative Democracy, sponsored by the National Endowment for Democracy. Please welcome Felipe Rey to Oregon. Thank you. We have about a little bit under an hour, but we just really want to be able to hear from each of you, if you can, and share just a little bit about, in your roles as public service practitioners, a particular community engagement example that you feel that we could learn from, in a particular, if applicable, maybe a lesson that you glean from that. So I won't go down the row like sometimes happens. Just anyone who feels like they kind of want to jump in, and those who might want to go last can, but anyone who wants to go first can.
I think I was elected to go first because my name was first. But
Okay.
I would happily see
Go
the
for
floor.
it, please.
Okay. So thank you for that welcome and the bio that you read. That I don't know where you got that, but
It's true.
well, it's true. But I want to take a step back and really talk about why I do the work I do. So the first big thing is that I believe that public participation and engagement is the cornerstone of democracy, right? And it should be collaborative. Engagement should be done in partnership with communities and not at communities. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about my experiences professionally and some lessons that I've learned both from my own engagement with community groups, my own organizing, and then research that I've done. But the thing that I wanted to start with was a little bit of my background. So I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. Who's been there? Nobody usually. Oh, I got a couple of people. Okay, so Little Rock, Arkansas, it's a town in Arkansas. It's the capital. It has historically been a very segregated city, and some of you will know it is notable for the integration of Central High School, one of the first high school integrations in the South, and the National Guard was brought in to do it. Why that's relevant to me is that my mother is Black, and I grew up in a Black neighborhood. My grandfather actually used to drive the Little Rock 9 to school. He was on the rotation. And so I grew up with civil rights activists, coming through my house. I had people who had done real work and real change, and it was hard, and it was violent, and sometimes it was hard to see whether there would be a payoff. At the same time, we were poor by any standards, right? And so we lived in a very poor community where public engagement was not something that happened. It was the box that got checked at the end of a project, at the end of a policy process. We're going to post a notice at City Hall that you can come to a meeting that you don't know about because we posted it at City Hall and nobody is going down there to check that out, right? So that was in the message board phase. And when I was a teenager, we had a really dramatic thing happen in our neighborhood. There was a building that started going up, and it was hard to figure out what it was going to be. It was a fairly large building, and it was actually on my street, and it was on a lot that had been vacant. After some digging, we found out that it was going to be a halfway house for sex offenders. And so this is one of those things that probably most people don't want in their backyard, let alone next door. It was right next door to my house. The neighborhood engaged the city, and the city said, well, we had these public notices. You should have come to the meeting. It's already been decided. Nobody knew about the meetings. And so this was my first experience, not my first experience, but it was a very real experience of being marginalized as a community and having things put into my backyard, literally, that the community had no say and there was no engagement. This was a big problem, and so I think about this often. The city's response was to cut the street in half and make basically where my house was the end of a cul-de-sac, and then there is still to this day a giant sort of wall that is supposed to keep people out of the community. The halfway house is not very well run. It's pretty loosely supervised. So I won't go too far down that road, but I do want to say in another example, I was in my 20s and I was doing social work with kids. And so I was a social worker running programs for Big Brothers Big Sisters, including some school-based mentoring programs and an after-school drama club. I was in this school, one particular school a lot. It was a school that was very low income. We had a large migratory population. And, a lot of kids were sort of, they were living a hard life. It's hard to be poor in America. One of the things that was a godsend for us is that we got one of the early community eligibility grants, which for food and nutrition programs, which meant that every child in that school could have free breakfast and free lunch every day without filling out any paperwork. If you have ever, the story doesn't, and this is a program that now exists and has morphed. This was early 2000s, and so it was a pilot. We had this great program. We were having a really great year. Kids were eating. And then the program was taken away because they had done their pilot, it was ending, and they were assessing whether it worked. So we lost the funding for that program and went back to parents have to fill out the forms. And we had a lot of parents who were not citizens and who were afraid of interacting with government in any kind of way. And so a lot of kids lost their free breakfast and lunch. And there was no sort of avenue to say, what is happening? This is not okay. At the same time, there was a spike in behavioral problems. There was reduction in learning. And for a while, it took the school counselor and me, it took us a while to put the two and two together. These kids were acting out because they were hungry, right? They were acting out because they were not eating. And you can't do anything if you're hungry, right? And so that started this lifelong interest in anti-hunger programs and food system and food justice work. And so I've spent a lot of time organizing community efforts around food systems and anti-hunger work with the acknowledgement that if you're hungry, you can't do much, you can't be productive, and you can't be a fully participating member of a community. And so in that sort of path that I've been walking, I co-founded the Indy Food Council, which is a food policy council in Indianapolis, which is I think it's now the 14th largest city in the country. It was a grassroots community-based effort, and I'll use examples from that as I go through sort of my lessons learned. But it was a really sort of freewheeling, we're just gonna bring everybody together, put them at the table, and figure out how we can improve the food system. Because what we also acknowledged was, I was interested in feeding people, but we had small businesses, we had farmers, we had public health concerns. There were lots of things happening in the food system, land concerns. In Indianapolis, there's a lot of heavy metals in the soil. And so we had to organize and bring the community together. It was a brand new effort, and so we took the newness of it to say, we're gonna design this so that community voices will be elevated, and I'll talk about that in a minute. That Food Policy Council is now permanently housed in the mayor's office and has a permanent budget line to promote food justice work, food sovereignty, and then just food policy work that works to build a better system, which is pretty impressive in a state like Indiana, which is often not wanting to take on those efforts. I'm currently doing very similar work with the Syracuse Onondaga Food System Alliance, which is located in Syracuse, New York, or in Onondaga County, where we're thinking about how do we build a better food system for everyone who lives, works, and plays in central New York. Through that work, we've leaned heavily on community engagement, and the USDA has given us, millions of dollars in funding specifically to engage community to think about what they need out of a food system and to build something that elevates community voice and takes into account what people actually want instead of thrusting it at them. In addition to all that, that's what kind of keeps me ticking. I've also done research and published a number of articles on how people collaborate and how we empower communities and community voice in governance and, again, as a cornerstone of democracy. So the larger picture is bringing voices into the democratic process that have not historically been a part of that process or have been marginalized. And so I'll go through some 5 lessons, and I promise I'll be quick because I've been talking a lot, of things that I have learned both through that practice work but also through scholarship and engagement. And it all really centers on being intentional in how you design community engagement forums, how you design public participation. Because you can have really good intent to bring voices to the table and say, we want to hear from you, but if you don't have a good process and follow-up designed, it's going to fall apart, right? So it's like bringing that ideology and action steps together. So the first thing is being really intentional about your mindset. And so this is sort of a meta or a bigger issue. It's not exactly the thing that you're doing to engage community. But what I mean by this is take an asset-based community development mind view, right? All communities have assets. Even if they have deficits, they have assets. And so instead of going into a community and telling them all the things that are wrong, go into that community and talk to people and say, hey, what's going on, and figure out where the assets are, because you can build on those. People don't like it when you come into their communities and tell them all the deficits and everything that's wrong with them. And newsflash, poor people know that they're poor, right? Like, I've been there, it's astounding how disrespectful well-meaning or well-intentioned people can be when they come in with this deficit-based mindset. So be intentional, have an asset-based community development mindset. Don't be a savior. You're not here to save these communities. Communities don't need you to save them. Acknowledge interdependence. So rather than doing things at people or for people, work in partnership with community. We are going to elevate our community as neighbors, not I'm going to save your neighborhood because it's poor. People don't like that either. So be intentional about your mindset. Go in, know that people have value. Also be intentional about the purpose and communicating that to the communities that you are working with. So with the Indy Food Council, the first thing that we did was to gather groups of people, organizations, public officials, community leaders. And then we also said we want to hear from people directly. And so we had a year-long series of community conversations where we went around to different neighborhoods to talk to people to say, what's working for you in the food system? What's not working? What do you want to see? We were really intentional about gathering people and about telling them what we were going to do with the data that we were collecting, so that we weren't coming in and doing what one of our community partners called weeding and seeding, where you come out and take out all the things you think are bad, throw in some seeds, and then leave. And so we told people why we wanted them to show up, how we wanted to empower them, what role we wanted them to play, and then we got their consent to do that. We also communicated back to them what we did with that data. It was the foundation and the cornerstone of the mission of the Indy Food Council, of the goals, and of the agenda that we set for each year moving forward so that we were working and being responsive to community need. The third thing I would say is be intentional about recruitment when you're trying to design public engagement forums or some sort of community participation. So Portland has a history of working with neighborhood associations, which is great. But in a city that has a lot of renters, you might think, who is missing from that? Homeowners associations tend to draw people who own their homes, which is great. We want those voices. But instead of making it an or, make it an and. Who are we missing from this table? And how will it shape outcomes? Because it's important to elevate voices. If we only have a certain set of voices at the table, we're going to develop policies and programs that serve those voices and not the ones that were left out. And I've seen this happen over and over again, both in leaving people out, but also bringing them to the table. And it is messy, and I want to acknowledge that it can be a really messy process, but you'll have better results, right? Collaboration moves at the speed of trust. And the other thing about being intentional about recruitment is meeting people where they are, both physically and mentally. If there is a church in a neighborhood that is an anchor institution, go to that church and talk to that pastor and say, how do we get the neighborhood in? If there's a local bar, if there's a community association, these are all examples of organizations we went to in Indianapolis to say, where are the people and how do we get them there? Just because you're a city official or the head of a nonprofit doesn't mean that that community is going to show up for you. Find out who the power brokers are and ask them for their buy-in, because it's going to go a lot further than a stranger. And then go to where the people are when they are there. So don't schedule meetings at noon in City Hall and expect people to show up, right? If you are having people come together at a mealtime, provide food and fellowship and childcare, right? And also transportation if that's an issue. So find out what is preventing people from coming to your forum and then solve those problems for them. They will be more likely to show up and to engage and to feel valued. The fourth thing I would say is be intentional about design. Don't bring people to the table and not allow them to eat. Malcolm X once said, I'm not going to come to your table and watch you eat, right? So if we bring people to a forum, give space for them to talk, do things to minimize power and differences. We can do things. One of the things that I have found in research with a doctoral student I've working with is that round robins are transformational when you have groups with power and differences, right? And so if you go around the room and ask everybody to say something, and it could be like, oh my God, my son passed his math test, I'm so happy. It doesn't matter. What it does is it gives somebody a voice where they maybe felt unsure that they could have one, particularly if they're in a room full of experts. Our society values expertise and knowledge that comes out of peer-reviewed journals and higher education and things like that. But there is a lot of knowledge that comes out of community, that comes out of life, and that lived experience is just as important when we're trying to develop policies and programs that impact communities. And too often it is negated or dismissed because people don't have fancy degrees or job titles or things like that. Don't fall into that trap, because you will miss things and the community will know that you are not legit and don't care about them if you're not valuing their lived experience. But also provide opportunities for people to talk so that they don't have to do it themselves initially, so that they feel like they have a voice in a space. And then the final thing is to be really intentional about that use of community data. So if you're collecting data from people, let them know, again, how you're going to use it and communicate back to them how it was used. And this is one of the things that we often fall down on, and I've been guilty of it in the past too. So with the Indy Food Council, we engaged a couple of AmeriCorps Vistas to take notes and write reports. They wrote reports and didn't just post them on a website, but we actually went back into communities, back to those power brokers, and we said, here's what we did with the data. And then for the Indy Food Council, we had a big party on a farm like this where we brought people together and said, here's how you contributed to the mission, the goals, let's all adopt them together, so that there was a consent process. And so I'll say finally that from a practical sense, this takes resources, so time, talent, and treasure, and it takes a lot of time to build relationships. when you're thinking about building relationships and engaging communities, don't wait until there's an emergency or a disaster or a problem. Build those relationships in good time so that when you're asking people to come to the table, they know who you are and they're going to come because you have engaged them in their humanity before there was a crisis, right? We don't build relationships with our friends or our family members only in times of crisis.
Of the airport, the Pentagon, and we have some other residents at the Arlington Cemetery, right? Who live with us. So, and we honor those service members every day. So we're fairly dense. We have 72% of our community rents and lives in, 61% rents, 71% lives in multifamily housing. Yet 75% of our land is, until recently, zoned for single-family homes. We recently passed missing middle housing policy and to allow additional housing types on those in neighborhoods. So we have a diverse community. Our schools, they speak 146 languages. And we also have this difference about people live in multifamily buildings and people live in single-family homes about what they want. In our neighborhoods, we have 62 neighborhoods, primarily made up of single-family homeowners. So we're doing we're having very similar conversations because it's the journey. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of context for the community we're in. We have 5 elected officials at large. We have a county manager of plan form of government. So a little bit like Congress and the White House. We have, our elected officials pass the policy, and our county manager implements government policy. We have a unique real estate split between our residential and business community. So our residential is 54 and our business community is 46. That is really a great partnership that we bring to the community. The businesses and residents come together to create revenue. And for those of you who have not, how many of you have been to Arlington, Washington, D.C.? We look like we're a county, but we look like a city, act like a city, talk like a city. We have all the services that a city offers, water, sewer, transportation, parks, our own libraries, our own public safety, fire, police, EMS, and our own human service department. So I thought that might help kind of who we are. So our engagement practice in Arlington, I'm really proud of. Within the Office of the County Manager, we have the Communication and Public Engagement Office. I lead that effort as an Assistant County Manager. And almost all of our key departments now have integrated communication and public engagement teams. That was not the case 7 years ago. They all had communications team, but engagement was a different story. So we meet weekly, not just for editorial planning, but to review what's happening, the engagement practice, what's going to happen each week, how we leverage each other, how we're not stepping on each other's toes, because we all want to reach the same people. So whether you're doing the transportation master plan or deer management or the water sewer treatment or, pickleball, we're all want to talk to the same people. So it's really important that we have that coordinated piece. So we have a really active engagement team across the departments. And they are embedded in the departments because they work hand in hand with planners and engineers to design effective, successful engagement. I mean, we are intentional about our design because I believe good design leads to good implementation and good participation. And with that, we've really worked hard to have kind of a one-stop Engage Arlington effort so that people don't have to go look or know what department's doing what or what neighborhood it's in, but they can go to one place and find all of the open engagements, whether it's online, whether it's an open house, whether it's a pop-up, whether it's a public hearing, whatever that is. So we have created early on in our journey 7 years ago, we did similar engagement. We found there was people, it was pretty disjointed. Individual planners and individual engineers were doing their own thing on engagement. Communications folks were not at the table. We didn't have engagement specialists embedded anywhere around the county. And so we created a 6-step guide to public engagement for capital projects. And the whole intent of this was to create some consistency and some intentionality across big and small projects. Like Arlington, I'm guessing Portland does thousands of projects and lots of policy development every year, and not all engagement can be at the collaborative level of engagement. Some things, if we're restriping a road in the same way we've always done it or we're paving it, we need to communicate that, right? But if we're changing the way in the configuration of the use of a road or space, or we're creating policy that impacts individuals, it's really important that we have a higher level of engagement. And so also aligning the right tools with the right, and the right strategy with the level of engagement, right? Because early on when I got there, we were doing big charrettes for restriping projects. And we were changing the configuration of roads and just showing up and telling people. And because of this, we've shifted our practice in how we do our engagement work. And so we still have, do we always get it right? No. Does everyone agree with the level of engagement we set? No. Sometimes we have to go back to the drawing board? Yes. But it's really helped. And I'm really proud of that work. But so the 6 steps include a lot of the things you talked about, which is starting with understanding the community and the context, and we created a My Projects map. What's going on there? And so if you're going into community, right now in Crystal City, it's just a part of Arlington. It's not a separate city. A lot of people think it is. We have Amazon HQ2 just is coming, and they're there and growing. But there's 52 projects going on in this little part of Arlington. And so when you go in and you want to, on a park project, and you're wondering why people are so frustrated, with all the transportation projects or, the building, you have to understand the context, right? And so understanding not just your engagement effort, but as a government, because as a community, we're one government. And then doing some stakeholder mapping. And we've recently been doing a lot of work on racial equity and applying a racial equity lens to our stakeholder mapping. So who benefits, who's burdened, who's missing, how do you know, and what are you going to do about it? And so we also, in the last few years, have developed a demographic data dashboard that allows us to understand kind of education levels, languages spoken in our community, employment levels, income levels. And so really being intentional, using the data, using contextual understanding and framework to do our stakeholder outreach and to expand and diversify who's at the table. And I'm really just excited that, I'll just give you an example. In 2019, I think, our budget engagement was a room where there were a lot of executives and a handful of single-family homeowners that came out to engage with us on budget. Fast forward to 2024, we had 2,400 people engage with us on the budget, 700 through pop-ups in the community, and almost 200 of those in Spanish. So, we're really expanding and diversifying kind of who's coming to the table and how they come to the table. And then taking the 6-step guide and training not just communicators and engagers, but every planner and every engineer has been trained on the 6-step guide and how to collaborate and with the communication engagement folks. And so communication being the thread, not the end point, but at all points along the road. So I've been in environments where they're separated and it is really messy. And when those are work together, it's dreamy. And so, when I first started in this position with Arlington County, people would be like, why are you in the room? Why are you here? Why are the communications team here? And now it's like, where are you? How are you? And then really planners and engineers, really, we're doing a lot of training and capacity building on asking the right questions, doing the data analysis. How do you tag it all? How do you roll it up for decision makers so that you can make informed decisions based on all the information that's gathered around that? But we're also doing the collaborative engagement work with community leaders. We have an Arlington Engagement Brigade, which is a group of community leaders that are kind of an extension to help go out in the community with us. We have almost 50 commissions. We use commissioners on a pretty regular basis to facilitate neighbor-to-neighbor conversations. And then during COVID and the census, everyone, complete count committee, right? Go, right? We had 99.8% complete count. We're very excited about that. But, right? Thank you. In a very challenging time, let me just say, probably one of the most challenging censuses of our time. And so we just trusted voices in the community. They weren't going to listen to Brian Helfer, government official. I think of myself as an advocrat, by the way. I like to think of myself as an advocrat. Advocate, bureaucrat, advocrat. Anyways, so advocrat, yeah. So it's not an original term. I'm sure I stole it from somebody else. But anyways, but those trusted voices are so important. So then fast forward, COVID, and we're like, how are we going to ensure? There's a lot of distrust because of past practice around, testing and around vaccinations, and so we created the Complete Vaccination Committee, and so very collaborative effort to bring trusted partners and trusted community leaders and individuals, faith-based leaders, community leaders, neighbors to neighbors, so that it wasn't government asking people to get vaccinated, but it was really that trust building along the way. So and then we recently rolled out an equitable engagement guide because we recognized that, we really needed to internally solidify our practice, to be intentional, to identify who's missing, to really, do language translation, plain language. And so that equitable engagement guide now allows us, and not that we needed permission before, but we were all over the map when how we were engaging diverse communities, black and brown people, people who speak languages other than English, individuals who have lower incomes, individuals who have disabilities, people in the LGBTQI community, all of those communities. And so really looking at opportunities to strengthen, and then using the data to understand who's participating and who's not participating, right? And so often we wait till the end to figure out kind of who we heard from, instead of along the journey of that engagement to come back and look at, we're missing people from the whole south of Arlington or the whole north of Arlington or the east and west. So really using the data effectively. So let's see, what, I think I've covered all of that. So a few things about our journey. I've mentioned some of them, that it wasn't always this way. We lacked early on any type of framework. And so I think it's really important that you build that. So my takeaways are, this is a journey. We're not done in Arlington. As a matter of fact, our 5-year action plan that we created 7 years ago, we've gotten through a lot of it. Some of it will never be done, because you're never done. But we're going to be I'm looking forward to learning on this engagement, because we've been designing our next big engagement around engagement that we will be launching this summer. As I mentioned, not all engagements created equal. So, align your engagement efforts with your level of impact. There may be people along the way that don't agree with the outcome. It's important to have good processes, to ground in processes, that you can point back to. Create and nurture community relationships for those trusted voices. I couldn't agree with you more on that. Communication's the thread. Don't make it disconnected. And celebrate the shifts in practices. As you expand your toolbox, we've really, I think, I'm excited about, we've expanded our toolbox. We keep trying new ways, new innovative approaches. We learned a lot during COVID. We were doing online and virtual engagement before COVID, but we got really good at it. And it was so cool, because people could be like, I'm putting my kid to bed, I'll be right back, right? So in Virginia, we have a pretty rigid electronic meetings policy set by the state legislature that doesn't actually allow for much electronic participation. During COVID, during the emergency declaration, we were able to shift to public hearings electronically. And so our county board, our elected board, has to be in person, but we now have as a policy, people can come in and testify and offer comment in those public hearings in person, but we have a policy that you can also do it online. That would have never happened, pre-COVID. We tried. And we have a policy that every commission meeting, we have 50 commissions, are hybrid, so people can participate in both ways. And so while we will continue to use online tools, we also recognize, and we learned a lot during COVID, that we needed to go into the community too. So we are doing a lot of work where we're just in the community, and not necessarily like come at 5 o'clock, but we'll be here from 5 to 7. And as people are getting off the bus, or they're coming out of the grocery store, or the food pantry, whatever it is, that we're there. And we're there pretty often now. So people early on, people were like, I don't want to talk. Who are you? And now, really, comfortable with talking with government and sharing their thoughts and opinions and seeing their voice heard. So I'm really excited about those shifted practice. And to city officials and leaders in the room and communication, just bring people in early. I just think often and consistency. So thank you. So thanks for setting me up. We planned that, right? Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you so much, Bryna. Felipe or Andrew, either one of you would like to go next?
Happy to go, Felipe.
Thank you.
Graciously gestured towards me. It is your time, Andrew. So happy to walk to the dance floor. Good evening, everyone. Perhaps you could say, let's try that one more time. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, we're at the halfway point, so can folks just kind of stretch your arms a bit? Wonderful, wonderful. Again, my name is Andrew Wilkes. It's a joy to be with you all. Incredibly inspired by the deep commitment to civic learning and civic engagement that is evidenced by everyone's presence here in person, as well as those who are with us virtually. I'm going to talk a little bit about the civic education, which I'd submit is, in many respects, the foundation of sustainable public participation. And while most of the remarks that I'm sharing are going to focus on civic education in the context of K through 12 public schools, I think there's some transferable and analogous lessons in community context, because certainly schools are not the only place, though they're a pivotal place where civic education takes place and occurs. I will also note that whereas civics was once a subject that didn't receive as much airtime, in the past 3 years, it has become popular for many good reasons and for some more ignoble reasons. Among them, January 6th, 2021, the insurrection led to a huge across the aisle appreciation for the importance of having conversations with folks you rigorously disagree with, but y'all live in the same neighborhood. So how are we going to figure out how to build consensus even when it's precarious and fragile? And then secondly, certainly the firestorm that emerged as a result of conversations, often mischaracterizations of critical race theory in 2021 and 2022 led to civics and social studies more broadly coming to the forefront of conversations, again, not only with respect to students and teachers, but with renewed import and significance for community members across the board. So my organization, Generation Citizen, was founded about 13 years ago by a college student in Rhode Island who recognized a need to create more connections between higher education and what was happening in terms of civic instruction in public schools. And since that time, we've grown to work in 7 or 8 states. And a part of the work that I do, which I'm going to try to derive and spin some lessons from, perhaps maybe not as assiduously organized and as eloquently enunciated as my colleagues to my right and your left, but I'll do the best I can. So excited to share a bit about that. The kind of civics education that we do is called action civics. And action civics is informed by, but different from the civics that folks may have heard. Perhaps folks have heard of Schoolhouse Rock and its ever memorable tune, I'm Just a Bill, on Capitol Hill. That ring a bell for anybody? And so the beauty of Schoolhouse Rock civics is that it teaches us some of those foundational concepts of the design of our public institutions, how bills become law, in theory, though practice is often much more messy and rough-hewn than what we get there. Whereas action civics is an attempt to really lean into some of the participatory dimensions of civics. And it really includes 3 dynamics that I think are as applicable in schools as they are in neighborhood coalitions, as they are in cross-cutting alliances of multiple policy domains. The first is blending research and root cause analysis on issues that students, or in this case, community members select. The second is really encouraging a mindset of agency, of curiosity. So instead of bringing fixed, immutable presumptions to how problems came to be, what solutions will or won't work, instead putting on a what if mindset or what else might we try. And then thirdly, I'm very much building on what Julia shared just moments ago, bringing together both community relationships and community assets that can make solving challenges and moving forward easier. A part of what we've seen work really well is having students be engaged in not only devising public policy solutions that flow from issues that they select, but them speaking with experts in communities, which include everyone from lawmakers to nonprofit leaders to residents who have been around the block in terms of many cycles of elections and community engagements, and aggregating from those qualitative interviews a clearer sense of what might work and how you can have policy solutions sustained over the long haul. A part of where I want to turn now is to talk a little bit about how some of my experience working in civics education might land, particularly with respect to Oregon. Oregon has been a leader in many respects in the past couple of years to take some steps on providing more civic education to students. In 2021, you all passed. I'm bragging and highlighting the receipts that you all made possible. It may be that some of you testified, perhaps, for these bills. So in 2021, Oregon passed SB 513, which is a semester-long civics education requirement in high school that begins with the class of 2026. And that's a bill that puts Oregon in a class of about 40 states that have at least required instructional time for civics education, that have an assessment that is required for students to take. And I actually prefer to use the language guaranteeing as opposed to requirements or mandates, because the language of guarantee, I think, really highlights that we're focused on the kind of civic education experience that young folks and students get in their social studies career. And so really want to just applaud you all for taking that really pivotal step in 2021. And not only did Oregon pass that bill, but you paired the passing of SB 513 with revising social studies standards in the state as well. And to do that during the year of 2021, when there was serious conflagrations about race, about telling the history of the country, good, bad, and ugly, as well as the beautiful and the differing dimensions, different kinds of beauty, perhaps, of the state, is to be applauded. So in terms of lessons that I would submit for consideration, there's already a semester-long requirement on the books. You all have already revised the standards in correspondence with teachers do civic education instruction. I'd lift up three things. The first is the importance of building strong, diverse coalitions. In every state that has robust civics education policy that engages students, parents, caregivers, educators, community members, you have vibrant coalitions. I'll give an example. In Maryland, we've seen deep engagement from your democracy reform organizations, your League of Women Voters, and similar sorts of organizations, your YMCA, Youth in Governments, civil rights groups like NAACPs and other sorts of stalwart organizations, youth organizing groups, those who may not necessarily wake up in the morning thinking about the finer points of curriculum, but who recognize that there's a lot at stake in civics education and in political education that happens in community context that can help us tilt further towards being an inclusive, multiracial democracy. And then there's also just kind of the brass tacks consideration that having diverse statewide coalitions helps to have more people in the districts that can raise their hands as constituents and say, this is a priority, which should be reflected in appropriations. If budgets are indeed, as some say, a statement of values in the language of dollars and cents, having people say, we value this kind of education in our community for our students helps to strengthen the efficacy of civics education and what happens in the community. The second thing I lift up is the power of having dedicated course time to the subject. Having a semester of civics education is a powerful, robust start. And I'd say as a complementary point that a full year of civics education rather than only a semester is the kind of best practice that we see in states like Illinois, Massachusetts. And for the majority of its tenure, Florida has been an example of civics education that has not been terribly contentious. I'm not going to wade into those tempestuous waters, except to say that for much of its history, you've had Florida, Illinois, and Massachusetts. And what unites them is, again, a full year of civics in high school, and then also having a semester in middle school as well. This is not to say that that is a process that is overnight. It is to say that having multiple points of deep immersion in project-based learning, in civics connecting to current events, and civics being tied to critical media literacy, that's important at different nodes along the continuum of not only student social studies careers, but we all need refreshers and repeated attempts to draw from the well of civic education. That is why on a Thursday evening, you all have dedicated your time online and here to be with us. Then the last thing that I'd note, which I think applies as much to teachers in classrooms as it does to organizers, facilitators, executive directors, dedicated volunteers, is making sure that there is coaching, instructional materials, and funding for teacher professional development. those who teach, those who facilitate, those who coach for public participation are really kind of artisans who help to bring the beauty of civics and politics and local democracy to life. And when teachers, facilitators, and community leaders can access that kind of robust support, communities can become the learning labs of democracy that they're capable of being. So what does that look like granularly? Training and skill building opportunities. In Illinois, we've seen a really great example of a foundation stepping up, the McCormick Foundation, to have about 13 different regions in different pockets of Illinois so that each community can have both the innovation and the contextual instruction in how to teach standards in this part of the state, but also having a uniform set of expectations so that all students are getting a deep and cohesive experience of what civics education entails. The second thing, and this comes from the Massachusetts example, is teacher stipends so that each district can have ambassadors who can teach both to standards and to the lived experiences of the students that they serve. And then finally, and this has been a point that has taken, I'd say, both a velvet hand and a willingness to kind of nudge a bit, benevolent nudge, but a nudge all the same. Incentives to both recruit and retain a diverse teacher workforce. The social studies profession is not as reflective in terms of its demographics as the students who are in our classrooms. And while it is absolutely the case that all kinds of teachers can teach all kinds of students, there's also some benefit to be realized when there's more congruence in the profession. And so having incentives for teachers, I think, has as its corollary in a community context, making sure that when there's an ask that's issued for folks to come out on an evening experience of civic education, to come out on a weekday for civic education, that there's both a high-minded appeal to the public good and to strengthening the commonweal, but also a kind of clear response to the what's in it for me. What are the benefits, the payoffs, the rewards that can be derived, not necessarily monetary, though it may perhaps be Metro card assistance or something along those lines, that can help make barriers to participation be reduced so that the incentives to participate over the long haul are actually increased.
People in Portland talk for a long time about doing K through 12 and having appropriate civics education for little kids all the way up. Have you seen any examples where that's been done or that's working?
So just a second, David, can you repeat that for the TV audience?
And I actually, Paul, can you just speak a little louder? Ask the question again.
Yeah, this is people in Portland have talked for a long time about doing civics education all the way through K through 12. Start with little kids, helping them get a voice, take on tasks or projects, learn advocacy skills and partnership and how to work together. So I'm just curious whether you've seen any examples around the country of communities that are doing that civics education, not just in high school, but also other parts of the K through 12 spectrum.
Okay.
Absolutely. A number of states come to mind. I think Massachusetts is doing a good job at that. But perhaps more relevant to your point, what is your name? Paul. I participated in a social studies standards revision process in North Dakota. And in addition to the joy of going to Bismarck, which was as welcoming from the community as it was bitter cold and unwelcoming as the temperature, we were able to work with folks to get project-based civics and more comprehensive forms of civics, because project-based civics isn't the whole story, in the elementary school standards. And so what I would say is, A, examples do exist, and then B, ideally having social studies standards as well as course requirements and the supports for teachers and districts at the elementary school level can help align that aspiration with the conditions that are needed to realize it.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much. Please give it, Andrew. And before we hear from Felipe, I just also want to remind everyone that if you have any additional questions, please feel free to write them down and hand them to Wendy or anyone in the chat that's listening online. Please put them in the chat for Sarah so we can ask as well. Yeah. And as I just also want to say, as someone who grew up on Schoolhouse Rock, thank you, Andrew. You are showing our age. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
There was just recently a whole special on Schoolhouse Rock of they did all of it was like rolled up into one. So look it up. It was very cool. It was about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, well, let's check that out. Felipe.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now you're receiving the printed slides. Well, thank you so much for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Wendy and Sarah and all the team. And thank you all for being here. I'm very happy. This is my first time in Portland, and it's a beautiful city. It's a place where you feel good from the very beginning. I like that. Okay, so I will start talking a little bit about my own journey, the things that I have studied and that I have learned, and some of the things that together with a wonderful team in Colombia we have done. You can follow this conversation with the slides. So I was born in 1984. That's the title of a very famous book by George Orwell. That was the year I was born in Bogotá, in Colombia. I would say, and this has a relation with the topic that I'm going to talk about, that it's deliberative democracy, and the true possibility of having argumentation in our societies. Perhaps the main fact or episode that marked my life was conflict in Colombia. You know, a very difficult armed conflict for many years. I didn't want to put a photo of conflict. I put a photo of peace. This is a photo of a picture of 6 years ago when the peace agreement between the Colombian government and the guerrilla, one of the main guerrillas, FARC, was signed. But what conflict taught me was the importance of dialogue, the importance of argumentation, and the importance of solving even our most difficult issues and political problems through good dialogue. I believe in that. I did my PhD in Barcelona. I spent 6 years in Barcelona and studying mainly two topics that are in the next slide, which are my fields of interest, which are deliberative democracy in one side and democratic innovation in the other. So my main concern is how can we reshape our bicentennial democracy. So we have inherited long-standing institutions for 2 centuries. What can this generation do to change those institutions, even those that have more time, like parliaments and executives and this kind of institutions? So deliberative democracy tries to bring new principles to the field of participation. So it's not just deliberation is not just about raising hands, it's not just about speaking, it's also about, and it's more about listening. It's more about listening. It's not just about of convincing, it's more about of being convinced and allowing to being convinced, to change our opinions through dialogue and to leave space for good arguments. That's the ideal of deliberative democracy. And democratic innovation is the field of how can we rethink democratic institutions? How can we build new forms of public deliberation? I will talk about one of these innovations very shortly, which is called citizens' assemblies. citizens' assemblies, which are part of a long trend of innovation in the last perhaps 25 years. Citizens' assemblies have four main characteristics, I may say. The first one is that they are representative in the sense that the members of citizens' assemblies are selected by lot. So the first picture that you see in this slide is from one of the French citizens' assemblies. So the people that you see there, they are not politicians, they not come from political parties. They are citizens who have been selected by lot. So every citizen has the chance to be part of a citizen assembly. This is how democracy was born in Athens. Democracy in Athens worked through sortition, not through election. So sortition is a different way of doing democracy. The second characteristic of citizens' assemblies is that they are deliberative. They are designed to have good dialogue, to have a good dialogue, respectful dialogue. They are impartial in the sense that people, before speaking about something, receive information from different corners of that topic, and then they deliberate. And finally, citizens' assemblies are influential in the sense that they want their recommendations to influence public policy. So with these ideas, when I returned to Colombia, I wanted to pursue an academic career because my vocation is to write and to study. This is what I like. But I also wanted to put these innovations into practice. That was my other objective. So together with Indira Latorre, we founded Ideemos in Colombia. Ideemos, that word in Spanish, it's a word in Spanish, it doesn't have an exact translation in one word to English. It would be something like let's think together, but in Spanish is ideemos, is just one word. Let's think together. So I will talk to you about one of the innovations that we did in Bogota that we helped to build in 2020. We did the first citizen assembly in Colombia and one of the first citizen assemblies also in Latin America. This was launched by the Bogota City Council, and we did it in 2020, 2021, and this year we are doing the third chapter or the third assembly. So as I was saying, and as it says in the next slide, this is the first citizens assembly in Colombia composed by citizens elected by lot, randomly selected. It is one of the first deliberative mini-publics in Latin America. We have other cases in Mexico, in Brazil, in Chile. It's something that is starting. And this was one of the 8 cases of institutionalization in the world that were identified by the OECD, and the only one in the global South. You can see in the next slide a representation of the composition of the assembly. So we had people from all the neighborhoods of Bogota city. Bogota is a very big city. It has 8 million people. So we have citizen representatives from every corner of the city. It was, of course, a gender-balanced assembly. It was composed 50% by women and 43% by men. We had people from all ages, proportionally to the presence of those ages in the population. And very important in a city so unequal as Bogota, and Colombia is one of the most unequal countries in the world, we have an assembly composed of people from low income. So if you see these tables, you will see that almost the 50% of the assembly was composed of low income citizens, and just the 5% of the assembly was composed of high income citizens. And you may ask why? Well, because Bogota, half of the population is poor. It's low income population. So they were represented for the first time in a political body, in a deliberative body, with people of those conditions. So and finally, the last slide, you can see the proportionality that we had between the six level socioeconomic levels that we have in the city and the representation that those levels had specifically in the assembly. So, for example, in the 6th level, which is the richest part of the population, which is only 1% of the population, they only had 1% of representation in the assembly. But for example, level 3, which is poor people, which are 35% of the population, had 39% of representation in the assembly. So in this form, through random selection and through lotteries, we can have true representative bodies who can do actual good deliberation about different topics. And the 3 criteria that normally are used to compose these assemblies are gender. So in the first place, we have perfectly gender balanced assemblies. The second criteria is age. So you have young people, you have adults, you have from all different stages of life. Then location. So for example, here in the city of Poland, if you organize a citizen assembly, you would have to have people from the 4 districts, the 4 main districts of the city. And then in Bogota, we included this 4th criterion, which was the socioeconomic criterion, because we wanted to have also that to be considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Felipe. Thank you so much to all of you for sharing. We have a couple of questions that we would like to share out, and one particular comment that I would like to share out. The first comment was to Julia specifically. I like the idea about feedback, especially where governments collect public inputs to inform certain decisions. I think it is very crucial for governments to communicate back to citizens and let them know of all the inputs collected, which ones made it through to inform final decisions. That feedback loop is crucial in demonstrating that officials are listening and are willing to share the power over public decisions.
I will just say amen. And with advances in technology, if we have that data in an electronic format, it becomes easier to do that, because one of the objections is often there's not manpower to do it, but we can write script to bring that data together and make it a less onerous process on public officials.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add, we've added as so when a decision point comes to elected officials, there's a board report. And there is now a public engagement section as part of every board report that identifies who we talked to, what we learned, and then what we've done about it. So, which is that's fairly new. And we're also posting like every comment we've heard, and we roll it up into themes, so that people can see not just a summary, but they can see their voice. So if we get 3,000 comments, it's organized, it's tagged. There's a summary, but then there's also people can access all of that. So, which I think the transparency is really kind of important.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. To Andrew, does this year of civics classes come with a certain or particular curriculum?
Great question. It doesn't have to be. Thank you so much. So the question on the table is, does the civic class come with a certain curriculum? And my response there succinctly would be that there's multiple curricula that can be used. Some states do mandate curriculum, but I think the states that have generated the best outcomes, students are reporting high civic dispositions, which basically translates into excitement about participating in democracy, more academic engagement. They provide guidance on how to teach according to standards, guidance in terms of pedagogy, but don't prescribe curriculum. That said, I'll wager that I think some important things that are comprised in good curriculum, I will actually lift up a report. Tufts University has a report called The Republic is Still at Risk, but Civics is a Part of the Solution, that lays out 10 research supported practices for what you could use to assess what good curriculum looks like. That might be a way of putting it.
Thank you, Andrew. And our second question is to Bryna. Can you describe more about the example of having city employers consistently engaging in the same physical locations?
Yes. Yeah. So, for example, we've really, we kind of use all the tools in the toolbox. We try to align the tools. So, whether it's deliberative dialogue, roundtables, pop-ups, online forums, kind of not every tool for every engagement. But what we've learned is that to be in the community, to hear from people that we otherwise would not come to their government. They just, these are folks that are busy working. They're trying to put food on the table. Some of them are working multiple jobs. And so we are outside on a regular basis. We have the Arlington Food Assistance Center, where people show up regularly to pick up their meals. We're there quite often. We have 2 affordable housing programs that have multiple buildings. We go regularly to those buildings, back to the same buildings. And then there's several markets, in Arlington. Remember, we're 26 square miles, so we're a little smaller. But we have 2 very active Latino markets that let us sit outside and put tabletops up. And so we start, those are just a couple of examples, right? But, if we're doing a park project, we're also in that park, so relative to what's going on. For transit, we're at those bus stops relative to what's going on. But for those regular places, trying to be in the community where people are regularly going, and we're part of the community. So I think that answers the question.
Yes, thank you so much, Bryna. And prior to transitioning to our next conversation with Portland experts that Wendy's going to facilitate, I actually would like to hold up and affirm this last statement and question, because perhaps it can be something that we could come back to, Jenna, when everyone is up here together. We talk a lot about speaking to community members, leaders, power brokers, getting their input, especially for government. But are we really lacking we are really lacking in after actions. People get frustrated and fatigued sharing their voice to meet engagement strategy. But how do we develop those action plans or transparently communicate the real capacity and timeline challenges of government resiliency and social justice work? Change takes time, but does it really need to if we are taking the right, quote, right after action, end quote? I'd like to hold that up so that when we speak to the Portland experts, and then afterwards when our guest experts join, that could be a question that they all could weigh in on. So, okay, yeah. Thank you. Please affirm our guests. Thank you so much.
Hi, welcome back, everybody. One thing I want to do is just offer some appreciations for that panel. I learned a lot, so thank you so much for being here. And also just for coming to visit us. We just really appreciate the fact that you were willing to do that. I know all of you came from far away, so thanks so much. I'm very excited. We're not going to call this a panel. We're going to call this storytelling, because I think one of the things we don't get a chance to do is tell each other our stories very often. And one of the things I'm loving about this meeting, for those of you who are online, I just want to describe to you what this is like. It is human. It is a human meeting once again. People are stepping over each other. People are getting too hot. And it actually has this feeling of like being super real. And I love that. And so I'm glad that we get to do that together. And So that's the tone we're gonna set here, and I appreciate it. So I'm gonna introduce three friends, and I'm really excited, and some folks that are, in the, to follow up on Andrew, doing some really amazing youth work. So we can't wait to hear about it. So I'm gonna first introduce Blanca Gayton Fairfan. I hope I got your name right. I probably didn't, but Blanca is fabulous, a really close partner of Oregon's Kitchen Table. She has a deep passion for building power with communities by combining leadership development, civic education, and advocacy tools. She brings a strong community and relationship-focused framework. Born in Michoacan, Mexico, Blanca immigrated at the age of 5 to Gresham, Oregon, and has developed her community roots in Gresham and East Portland. Her involvement in the community kicked off when she got involved in the Multnomah Youth Commission, yay for that, woohoo, which is what set the foundation for her continued involvement in the community and the work she does today. Blanca is now the Policy and Communications Director at Participatory Budgeting Oregon, which is a fabulous organization for those of you who are connected or want to be connected to participatory budgeting. And next to her is Carol Way. And Carol is also involved in participatory budgeting. She's the youth leader for Youth Voice. Carol was raised in Portland, and she's a first-generation Burmese Karen immigrant who believes in the power of youth voice and choice to create equitable solutions. She's a graduate of the fabulous Portland State University, Urban Honors College, whose experiences growing up within an underserved community of immigrants and refugees provides the framework for many roles she embodies today. She champions Youth Voice, Youth Vote, Oregon's first ever participatory budgeting process. Linda Robinson, who's been a friend of Oregon's Kitchen Table since we were born. Which I appreciate enormously. Linda was born in Portland and has lived in East Multnomah County or East Portland most of her life. She has served on numerous nonprofit boards, community advisory boards, and task force groups for a period of 35 years, the majority of them related to parks. Of all the projects she has worked on, she is proudest of and best known for Gateway Green, a park project that took 15 years to complete. She's always been an advocate for meaningful, timely public engagement. These are three Portland stars that I am so happy to be with. So tell us your stories.
Oh, okay. So I answered your question, so I guess I'm already talking. So I didn't mean to self-select myself. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to start off by saying Closer.
There you go.
Ooh, okay. Hopefully my stomach doesn't just start gurgling because it's like that time to eat. So my name is Carol Way. As introduced, I am a first-generation Burmese Karen immigrant. I'd also like to introduce myself as Kema. That is my Burmese name, which, honestly, this is my first time introducing myself with that name, Kemar. So, and I mean, growing up, I just chose to go as Carol because Kema, like, what is that? It would always be mispronounced. Made fun of, and definitely made me feel othered. And unfortunately, that had been my experience growing up in the beautiful city of Portland, but not having that much representation. And I'm sorry, I'm getting choked up right now, and I'm trying to combat this. Just because it's such a privilege and an honor to be here today. When my mom and I drove in through here, there was written in Burmese the words "Jozobare," which means welcome. And this has actually been the first space that has intentionally designed, incorporated other languages, especially the language that I grew up with. And I think that's just so powerful. So yeah, I think that's definitely contribute to a wave of emotions. And I know as someone who identifies as a woman that, I put on my power suit today because I wanted to be taken seriously. But, I feel like having that armor, it shouldn't be necessary. And when it comes to creating a Portland for all, and not just who it's historically been, we need to recognize that there's a lot of healing to be done. going to take a pause. Thank you. To provide some context, what's Burmese Karen? So my family in 1992 immigrated from Myanmar, and it has been coined as many names: a military oppressed nation, a nation bleeding. But I really want to center Myanmar as a nation in Southeast Asia, which has undergone a lot of political instability, which arguably started with colonialism. And to this day, she is a nation who fights for democracy. My mom, who's here, hi, Mom. Who really wanted to record me, even though there's that recording there, but it's just like proud mom moment, and I love you, Mommy. She, in 1988, was part of the protests, youth-led protests to decry the military dictatorship, which has long stripped the people of Myanmar of their human rights, freedom of speech, like life, liberty, and all of these things that I feel like I've, with privilege, say that I've been able to take for granted here, to be able to speak my mind, over in Myanmar will get you put in prison or executed without any sort of repercussions, because it is currently under a military dictatorship. And my mom was protesting that in 1988, and we continue to do so in 2023. And we're not going to stop, because why should we? We're going to keep protesting, and we're going to keep knocking on these walls until they come crumbling down. And so that's just some context of how I came to the States. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad, for coming here. And in 1997, I was actually born in San Francisco, but couldn't take it there for long, so we came to Portland when I was 1 year old. So I always have to say that, like, oh yes, technically I was born in San Fran, but I consider myself a Portlander through and through. And it's just a real privilege to be here today, as I've already gushed about. And another thing was, I had a whole presentation that I was trying to memorize and, speak with, but I just wanted to, share my story, and stories come from the heart. I think my brain has the perfect grammar, and will make sure I'm not rambling, but my heart gushes, as you have already seen so far. So growing up with this sort of background, feeling very privileged to be here, but also, of course, feeling, othered as literally the only Burmese Karen student in my classes growing up. If there ever was someone with the same last name, well, that was my sister or that was my brother. And that kind of sets the stage for why I'm so passionate about the work that I do today. After graduating, I really wanted to stay in Portland. I love my family, and Portland State University had an amazing inaugural process called Build Exito, that was funded by the National Institutes of Health. The NIH recognized that there is a significant disparity in terms of who can participate in research and who can become researchers or have the PhDs attached to their names. And I heard about this process through a mentor who really encouraged me to apply. And as a Burmese Karen person who had never been to a doctor's office treated by a physician who looked like me, had to overcome an accent like me, I wanted to be the representation that I didn't see. And I got accepted, and was able to learn what it takes to be like a researcher, and was spent the majority of my undergrad in Oregon Health and Science University's asthma lab. And through that, that really connected me to a lot of Portland State faculty, and as well as OHSU faculty, including faculty from the Equity and of the Institute of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at OHSU and PSU. And I'm actually really excited to share that I will be starting med school in the fall, so class of 2027. But before that, though, that was a big time lapse. After graduating, I graduated right at the cusp of the COVID-19 pandemic when that really started to develop. And as good luck getting a job, right? And so I took the first job that I could as a medical scribe for the hematology and oncology division. And with the coronavirus being such a wave that really devastated a lot of communities, I heard through Unite Oregon that they were starting a Clackamas County Leadership Council. And from there, one of our amazing participatory budgeting advocates gave a presentation on, what participatory budgeting is. And so it's actually a movement that started in 1989 in Porto Alegre, Brazil, that really developed out of the way most of these things develop, from injustice and finding solutions to combat these injustices. And now it's made its way to multiple cities, thousands of cities. In 2009 was the first participatory budgeting process in the United States of America, and now it's knocking on Oregon's door. Now, what is participatory budgeting? Participatory budgeting is what I like to say, a way to deepen, diversify, and strengthen our democracy. It understands that democracy was built by a lot of people who don't look like how a lot of people in the United States currently do. Very kind of hidden, and I don't want to get in trouble by saying elitist. And so it recognizes that, the person who grew up, on Southeast Division recognizes the needs of Southeast Division and what needs to be there, right? The people who drive over the potholes, they know, oh, that's where it is. And so it really taps into and acknowledges that the people who live, learn, pray, play, or go to school here really have a pulse on what needs to be fixed in our societies, in our cities. And so that's participatory budgeting. And as soon as it was told to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get on this. I have a lot to say to anyone who will listen. And so that really started my induction into participatory budgeting Oregon. Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, we've realized that youth and communities which have already faced so many disparities, all of these were exacerbated, because of this virus. And among the communities that really suffered and took a hit were our youth. Our youth have faced novel challenges amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, with transitions to online learning, increased feelings of isolation, and affronts to their mental health. And so that's why the American Rescue Plan Act, which was a $1.9 trillion package, was developed in order to help, restore these sort of disparities and improve the quality of life for the people in our nation. And so I'm so excited to share that our very own senators and reps, specifically Senator Casey Jama, Senator Chris Gorsuch, and Representative Ricky Ruiz, committed $500,000 of American Rescue Plan Act funds to Youth Voice, Youth Vote, which is actually Oregon's first participatory budgeting process. And we're actually this year celebrating Participatory Budgeting Oregon's 5th anniversary, yet this is the first process that I've mentioned. And so it's taken, years and years of fighting, advocating for participatory budgeting in order to actually see its first cycle implemented. That's why we don't give up after the first year of something not happening. We don't give up after the second year. We keep going and going and going. And so being able to be amongst 11 other passionate youth and in a youth-led steering committee in a process led by youth, designed for youth, has been incredibly, I'd say empowering. That the little girl who grew up with an accent and, just didn't really had felt like this hyphenated, separated American her entire life gets to be a part of this. And I'm even more excited to share that we've went through the process design, have had idea collection events in wintertime with over 244 youth ideas collected. That's incredible. So just like clap for that. In our cities, including Gresham, well, specifically in Senate Districts 24 and 25, which includes East Portland, East Multnomah, and portions of North Clackamas County. So that includes Gresham and Fairview, Troutdale, Park Rose. Really areas that have historically been underserved when we think about Oregon in general. And so having youth come to these idea collection events and be like, wow, you really want to hear our opinions, what we have to say? And these are youth from the ages of 13 to 25. So they include youth as young as those who are in middle school, up until 25-year-olds, so young adults. And so it's just been really honoring to see these youth be like, oh my goodness, you want our opinions, and our voices can help make a difference. I've always thought that, when we talk about this metaphoric, symbolic table, and how, right, these tables, if they don't have all of us, then it's not a table for all of us and should, really have some remodeling. That our youth need to be part of these discussions and conversations when it comes to creating solutions in our cities, because when we invest in our youth, right, we invest in our collective futures. So we've had idea collection events, and now we've actually been in the process of project development, which is incredibly exciting. Youth have distilled these 244 ideas into 10 project proposals, which with nonprofit orgs, including Apano, Day One Tech, Portland 5, and Hey Doc Clinic, as well as Friends of Noise, are going to be youth-led, youth-created projects that our youth are going to be deciding on, voting on. And these projects are going to be implemented. I always say participatory budgeting and youth voice, youth vote is a process that, takes a real budget, which exists, utilizes real people on the ground, and makes real projects. And lastly, and importantly, in real time. So these are projects that are not going to be taking, decades to even see something. It's happening now. And it's incredibly exciting. And that's why I just really stand behind participatory budgeting and youth voice, youth vote, because it takes these difficult parts of democracy that it has historically been inaccessible, a hidden process, and it really gets rid of all of those, right? It's transparent. It centers our communities who have historically not been able to have a say in how these decisions are made. I like to say that it brings a mic to the communities which haven't had the chance to share their voices. So that's kind of just been my story. In addition, other than Youth Voice, Youth Vote, just the community of immigrants and refugees that I consider, my family. We are also continuing our fights for democracy for the people of Myanmar through fundraising and having I feel like food is the pathway to getting close. And so in addition to Youth Voice, Youth Vote, also help make Burmese food and sell them to do fundraising. But yeah, thank you for listening to me talk. I think I really rambled there, but it was just such a privilege to be here. And I can't believe you all listened to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. We want to hear more stories from you.
Thank you.
Linda, do you want to? And then Wonka, yeah.
Well, okay. I'm the opposite end. You're just getting started, and I'm trying to unwind and not do so much of that. But there's probably 60 or 70 years difference in age.
Can't tell,
okay.
Right? Can't tell.
Well, it's interesting because I know people in common. I've never met either of these two young women, but I know her sister. And I know Jim Lappy, who's been working from the start with participatory democracy.
That's Portland in a nutshell right there.
Right, exactly, it is. So that's pretty interesting. So I just wanted to kind of I have some points I had listed, things I've learned from those years of being involved in a variety of different kinds of processes that some of you have mentioned, as you know, our experts mentioned as they talked about it. And it's interesting how I, looking at that and how they played out in these various organizations that I've been involved in. But first, I wanted to talk about, I got started with my public engagement in the 1980s when they were annexing the area that we're in now. I lived in mid-Multnomah County, unincorporated area. They decided that they were going to annex this part of the city, and it was a very difficult time and a difficult process. There were a variety of techniques and things. We really didn't have much say in it. We didn't have a vote. We were basically told there were a couple things that had to happen. I remember I went to a couple meetings in Park Rose. I lived in Park Rose at the time. And we were told, among other things, that the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office was no longer going to be providing police services in the urbanized portions of the county. So if we wanted any police services, we would need to join the city because the county would not be providing those. So we were also told there was the Mid-County Sewer Project. That was my second involvement with public engagement. This part of the county was not as densely populated for many years, and so most of the houses had either a cesspool, a brick-lined cesspool in their backyards, or a septic tank if they were more newer thing, and we were told that we would be getting a sewer system. We were also told that it would be each homeowner's responsibility to pay for all of that retrofit cost. And of course, it's more expensive to retrofit than it is to put it in the first place. And we were also told at the same time that we would get to help pay for the big pipe project, which was going to correct the sewage problems that they were having with the older part of the city. And we were thinking, this doesn't seem quite fair. We have to help pay for their improvements, but we have to pay for ours ourselves. Eventually, they responded to a lot of public backlash, and they did come up with a low-interest loan program that homeowners could use to get that retrofit made. But those were my first very difficult and disappointing engagement with public involvement with public engagement projects. I eventually joined a neighborhood association. Well, but I didn't really. I just started going to the meetings. And then they started asking me to come and report about some of the things I was doing related to the Columbia Slough, which is a major water body. Not a major, well, it's the water that used to flood the Portland area every year in the spring, channeled into a series of sloughs. They used to move around and be a lot of ones. So I got involved with the Columbia Slough. It all started, I decided to do a midlife career change. I was about 40, and I had been working at the university and at the school district doing data analysis and number crunching and that kind of stuff for 17 years. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And I went to a career change class and discovered that the problem was that I'm a people person, and I was not doing anything with people. And that's why I was just so unhappy. So I started doing a lot of volunteer work and just going to meetings, introducing myself as, I'm Linda Robinson, and I'm just trying to figure out what's going on in the community and what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I started going to Metro's what turned out to be urban green spaces, but they had an awful name before that Mike Houck had. It was mapping something or other. It was this terrible name. And so I got on committees, and I just started doing that. Eventually, it dawned on me one year that I had gone to the first Earth Day, participated in it in 1970, and I had joined some organizations, Audubon Society and the Sierra Club and some others, and I'd been reading their magazines and their newsletters for all these years, 15 years maybe, and I'd never gone to a meeting. I'd never done anything. I'm thinking, why don't I look at maybe a career that somehow has something to do with Earth Day. And so when Earth Day came around the next spring, I went to as many Earth Day events and things as I could, and eventually through a process with this class, I also discovered that somebody said, I really was interested in urban wildlife. Somebody said, well, why don't you volunteer at the Wildlife Care Center? Well, I don't want to handle wildlife. I just want to know that they're there and that they have a place to live. So you gradually narrowed it down and started doing work with the Wetlands Conservancy. I took on a little project with them, and that was silly. I agreed to do a bibliography for them. Now, why would I do that when what I was trying to do was get a job that had something to do with people? But from there, they did say to me, look, they're starting some work in Fairview about the Fairview Creek. They're going to try to do a plan for the Fairview Creek watershed. And you live out that way. Why don't you just kind of go? So I did. And so it kind of went from that. And then I got involved with the Columbia Slough. Fairview Creek flows into the Columbia Slough, and I live in the Columbia Slough watershed. So I got involved with that group. I was a founding member of that watershed group maybe 30 years ago. That, to this day, is still one of the better, what I consider, public engagement processes that I've been involved in. And we can talk about that a little bit more later. But that led to a lot of other things. And so from all of this, I came up with some points that I'd like to talk about. One was mentioned by Carol, that these processes, they take time, they take patience, and they take persistence. I actually came up with a life motto out of this process: patient persistence. Particularly when you're working with government and when you're working with projects, they have to go, there's a certain amount of process that they have to go through. And when you're working on a project, you have to you got to let it simmer and let it go through those processes. But you also have to be attuned to when it gets stuck. And if it's stuck, then you want to talk with people. And I worked with Sarah and Wendy on this. This was the Friends of the Gateway Green project. We were working, and we got to a point where Metro was waiting for the city to do something. The city was waiting for ODOT to do something. They owned the property, and ODOT was waiting for Metro to do something. And finally we said, look, can we bring you guys together and figure out what can we do so that you can simultaneously move forward and not just be stuck? This happened several times that we got stuck. So these things, and there had been bicyclists who had gone to ODOT a number of times over the years and said that they would like to make this property into a place where off-road bicyclists could recreate. And in every case, it never went anywhere because within 6 months to a year, they'd throw up their hands and they'd say, oh, God, this shouldn't be, why can't we just do something? Why can't we just go out there with our shovels and make some trails? And ODOT, that doesn't work. So finally, this other fellow and I, the idea came out of, I was on an advisory committee for the urban renewal area. And this property is not in the urban renewal area, but the access to it is in the urban renewal area. And so we were trying to think of what could we do to make this community, the Gateway area, more inviting for investment, for people to not just pass through it, but actually come and have a job there or live there. And we saw this property, and he had this idea, and he mentioned it to me, and I had recently retired, and I said, I'll help you. So that's, then where was I going with that? Oh, let's see. So it takes time, and it takes process, and patience. And so the next time that the bicyclists came to ODOT, they said, oh, go talk to these people. They're working on a project. So then we collaborated, and we worked very closely with the off-road bicycle groups to actually make this happen. But we needed that collaboration. But I think also ODOT knew that both Ted and I had worked on a number of community projects in the past, and that we had stuck with them, and that we that we had an ability to organize and to actually make something happen where they were just a one-time, in and let's do something. So, so that's the biggest takeaway that I have from my experience with public engagement. The other thing is that that public engagement doesn't always have to come from government. It can originate at the grassroots. And this project did originate from the grassroots again. Like I said, we were looking for something that would make Gateway, give it a name, give it a place to go for a reason. We approached it a number of different ways, but I've seen that happen with other things. With the Columbia Slough Watershed Council, again, they did a strategic plan, and they had these action items. They identified where some of the issues were and what agencies had control over that, who you might need to work with in order to make something happen there. And then they worked on that plan. So I can't remember which one of you talked about coming up with a action plan, but the same thing with a group called East Portland Action Plan. The mayor at the time and our local state representative at the time, who was Jeff Merkley, who's now our state senator in Washington, D.C., they put together a process to come up with an action plan for East Portland, how to make it more livable. And there's 200 and some items on there, and we identified what agencies we'd need to talk to, what kind of action might need to be taken, and then it went to City Council to be adopted. And I remember one person in particular who testified at that process who said, I'm very concerned that this plan not just be put on a shelf to gather dust like so many other plans have. And so we created a group called the East Portland Action Plan. We actually tried to find another name. We couldn't come up with another name that anybody could agree on. So we're called the East Portland Action Plan, but they meet monthly. They have been for maybe 8 or 9 years now. Before COVID, we had 40, 50, 60 people who came to the meetings every month. It's one of the most diverse groups that I've ever worked with. And they do more than, they work on these action items. The work is done in various committees. Many of the people who are involved with the East Portland Action Plan were involved already active. Not all of them. We recruited a lot more, but some were involved with education. Some were involved with transportation. Some with environmental issues, and essentially it brought them together. And so they each continued to, in some ways, work on those separate issues, but one that's something that's really important, they can come to the full group and get an endorsement or a testimony from the full group that says this is really important to people who live in East Portland, and then they, as a group, we make a testimony which I think is a lot stronger because it represents so many different interests. But the group also was working on teaching people how to be proactive. Once a year, we would go to the offices of each of the elected city commissioners and the county commissioners and the metro commissioners with a group of people from 3 to 6 people. We would have a little kind of a program, a presentation put together where we would thank them for the actions they took that related to our action plan for the last year, and we would talk about what we'd really like to have them work on the next year. We always made sure that we included at least 1 or 2 people in that group who had never been to the office of an elected official, so they could see that you can actually go into City Hall and talk to people. And, so with those kinds of things, so it was really teaching people how to, and letting them learn how to be proactive. We celebrated even our small little accomplishments, which most of the early ones were small. But then after a few years, we got a big one. We had been advocating for years that they make improvements to Powell Boulevard, which is a state highway that's in the city and had not been improved since I grew up in Gresham and used that as the main route to come into Portland. And the road really was basically the same as it was in the 1960s. And so, but then one year we actually got a huge allocation to make some major improvements on Powell Boulevard, which are still in progress, I think. So that, that was a major accomplishment. But one of our first ones was, it's unsafe crossings. East Portland has a lot of streets that are cul-de-sacs, and there's not a lot of connectivity. And so we have but we have these major arterials that run through it. And it was very difficult. Well, we actually have the pedestrian death rate is higher in East Portland than the rest of the city. And so we had been talking with various people. Well, suddenly some money was available to the state legislature, and it was almost the end of the fiscal year. And one of our local representatives said, that could be used to make some crossings of these arterial streets safer in East Portland. And they got the funding to make 12 signalized crosswalks in East Portland, and they've all been installed now. So, and there's some of them have a light, but most of them it's a flasher. But in a couple of cases where they're near a school or something, it actually turns red. So that was a big. I mean, it was a little thing in a way, but it was a big thing for us because you could actually cross the street safely. So, there were a couple other points I just wanted to make. And a lot of you guys have talked about the things about when they meet and where you meet, and don't expect people to always come to City Hall. In fact, when you live far out here getting to the middle of the city is a big deal. It takes time, takes money. Bringing things out to the public is a really good step. I also was thinking about in terms of, I like that little matrix that you passed out, the selection process for these city engagement groups. I served on the Parks Board for a few years, and that, you apply, and then I don't know who makes this decision. Somebody evaluates it and invites you to be a member, and then it has to be approved by the city commissioner, and, but that as opposed to the East Portland Action Plan or even the Columbia Slough Watershed Council, where at the Watershed Council we designated that were certain interests that needed to be represented there. Recreationists needed to be represented, education, and then we let those groups pick who they wanted to send, which is a whole different process than it being picked through that application in the city commissioner approving process. East Portland Action Plan, anybody can come. In fact, they're all invited to come. So different selection processes for different purposes is really important, and it's pretty exclusive when you have the approved by the city commissioner.
Thank you so much.
Probably talked too long.
No,
already.
you were fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your stories, and thank you for all the work. So yeah, thank you so much.
Can I just make a quick comment? That East Portland Action Plan is one of the best processes that Portland has ever had.
I agree.
And it was supported by the city with like $250,000 to $300,000.
Well, and the other aspect of that, though, is it really creates kind of an issue because that was a special funding through the mayor's office, and then after a few years they decided, well, maybe it should be done by now. And so it wasn't going to be in the mayor's office anymore. So the question has been, and it's still going back and forth, where should they be? And then there was talk about, well, we should make it a board or a commission. Well, then you have to go into that application and approval process. And it's still being tossed around. They're now in the Office of Finance and something or other, and we still haven't figured out where it should go.
Thanks.
You guys made decisions by consensus, not by
Right. Right. Childcare, food, interpretation.
We had people coming from all over the world. We would always take them to the East Portland Action Plan.
For me, of all the work I've done,
Not from Portland. That is an amazing model.
that's
So for those of you who are listening, there's a love fest for the East Portland Action Plan that's fabulous, including like how the process was conducted. I'm just trying to summarize, Paul, so tell me if I'm wrong. That there was interpretation, there was food, there was childcare, there was inclusivity, there was money provided, and decisions by consensus. Thank you.
And money to give out in grants for the community to decide how they want to use the money.
Thank you so much for amplifying that project here. I actually think that does make me want to know. We've been telling people online what's happening in the room, but for those of you who are in the room to know what's happening online, that's where 9 other languages are being interpreted. So there's a channel for 9 languages there, and folks who are in the room who want to have those languages also have the availability to have headsets. So the interpretation isn't visible to us, but it's visible to the online community. Of course, we have American Sign Language with us, which we very much appreciate. And I'm sorry that I didn't make that visible before. Blanca.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for having me here this afternoon or evening. My name is Blanca Gaitan Parfan, use she, her pronouns. My family immigrated to Oregon, specifically the Southeast Portland, Gresham area from Mexico back in 2002. So at the age of 5 is when I became living here in this area. Very much like the experience of immigrant communities and families, there's always a push for, a desire for our parents to get a better quality of life, access to education. But one of the things my mom and my dad always wanted was for us to for my brother and I to be involved in the community and do cool things and have experiences that they were not able to get back in their home country. And so that kind of was always something that was ingrained for my brother and I. So one of the things that really set the foundation for my involvement in the community was this program called the Multnomah Youth Commission. And for those of you who are first time hearing, it's a youth policy body for the city of Portland and Multnomah County. And so it includes youth ages 13 to 21 who live, work, or go to school within that area. And so when I heard about it, my junior year of high school, I was like, what is this program? What do you mean I can go learn about how to get involved in my community and learn alongside peers and just find community? So I got involved in that program, and it still to this day, I bring it up whenever I connect with organizations or with, different people, and clearly in a space like this, because it had such a deep impact in the work I do today. At that time, it was a group of youth who came from all different areas of Southwest Portland, Northeast, East County youth. And so we were able to work on issues that were impacting us as youth in the community, because only we knew what it was like to be a 17-year-old in Portland or a 17-year-old in Gresham, right? And so we had those ideas and those solutions to the issues that that us and our peers were facing. And so, I got to build some skills that you typically don't have as a 17 or 18-year-old, how to build an agenda for a meeting, how to facilitate a meeting, how to participate in a meeting with the mayor or a county commissioner. Those types of experiences are very unique, but they shouldn't be. That's the type of involvement that our youth should be able to participate in. And I was involved in that for 2 years as a youth participant, and I really enjoyed the work that we were doing. And I was starting college during that time, and there was a position available to be a program staff for the Youth Commission. And so I went on to be a program maid for the NYC. And so I got to kind of have a switch of going from participant to staff. And now the youth that were, very first time getting involved in something, all the way to those who were already a little bit more experienced. And I got to support them in their involvement and see them grow in their leadership skills and their knowledge through youth adult partnership as the framework for how the Youth Commission functioned. And so, it really set me up for liking to do this work, particularly with young people, and also with young people who come from diverse communities. The majority of those youth, when I was a participant and as staff, were coming from like low income immigrant backgrounds, renters, like so many different identities, lived experiences, and languages spoken within that group. And a lot of the work that we did was learning, right, about how these like systems functioned, or like the role of the city versus the role of the county and the types of services each one does. And so many different types of things that we learned. And that oftentimes our communities, or like our parents or other youth, don't have access to participating in similar spaces. So that was like one of the foundational things that really set me up to where, like, what I do today and like why I do this work today. So I think when asked like what does like community engagement look like, or what should it look like, I often think about like it's more than just getting input from the community. Our communities are asked every day, what do you want to see? What's impacting you? What issues are you facing? And time again, our communities share what they're experiencing, but oftentimes it stops there, right? And, people get tired of just being asked and seeing no real action. And so when we think about, opportunities for involvement, they have to be more than just taking information from community or just having those listening type of sessions with community, and actually sharing power with those particular communities so that they can have a voice on how to solve those types of issues that they are facing. So I am involved with an organization called Participatory Budgeting Oregon as a policy and communications director. And one of the things that I learned when I started back in August, we were launching, as Carol mentioned, the first participatory budgeting process in Oregon called Youth Voice, Youth Vote. And to me, it was like the dream project come true, because it was youth decision making, and it had that East Multnomah County focus. So that project to me is like a combination of all the things that I wish I would have like been able to participate in when I was younger, right? I was very fortunate that the Youth Commission was an opportunity that I participated in. However, there were so many other youth that never got access to spaces like that. So, the practice of participatory budgeting being a way of sharing real power and real money and real decision making with communities is really what keeps me involved in this type of work, and working with youth and young adults such as Carol and like our other youth leaders. It's very rewarding to me, because I know how much it had an impact when I was that high school student and looking at like what interested me. One particular story about this work that I'm doing today is we have this first process, right, of Youth Voice, Youth Vote being the first time that participatory budgeting is done in the state. However, it's not a process that is institutionalized within our form of government. One of the campaigns that we were working on this past fall at PB Oregon was the charter reform, right, with the city of Portland. And we got very close to we have now a language for a PB, participatory budgeting amendment to the charter. However, it's currently in the hands of our elected officials at the city council. But one of the story that I really think about is in January, my colleague and I went to City Hall to speak with the staff of the current city councilors, and providing a little bit more insight on what is PB, how does it work, like answering those types of questions so that they can better understand why this is a tool for participation that actually can be a little bit more meaningful for communities. And when we're walking up those steps to the different offices, I had the realization of oh my God, 10 years ago, I was here at City Hall as a youth coming to my Multnomah Youth Commission meeting, and now I'm here talking with the chief of staff for a city councilor and advocating for this change to the charter. And I thought back to when I was 16, 17 and thinking these spaces, right, these institutions were not really open or meant for, our communities. And so to be able to participate in that space when I was in high school, and then now, to be doing this as my job, it's beyond what I could ever really imagine doing. So the other aspect of that story is that creating change and pushing for change takes a lot of work, and it's not only a few people pushing these different areas of advocacy forward, but really creating opportunity and space for others and bringing people alongside us. And so, you heard from Carol here today, who is one of the youth leaders that works with us, but we have a whole team of other youth who are as young as 13 years old, who I have been have the privilege to work with and have strategy sessions on how do you advocate, how do you prep for a meeting with commissioners, how do you write testimony, and let's practice you giving your testimony out loud. So when we think about creating spaces like that, it takes a lot of time, intentionality, and resources, and really love for that type and that level of community engagement in order to do it well. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Blanca. So I appreciate all three of you so much. And I know that it's cruel to see the gorgeous food of Mississippi chefs out there and to keep you in here. So I'm going to just give you what's going to happen next. I'm going to ask one question of the panel. And then we're going to go have dinner. And I know we heard a lot fellowship is really important, so we're going to have that fellowship. We will, when we come back, ask our guests to just give 2 sentences about something that they connected to, that they heard from our Portland storytellers. And then we have a lot of work for you all. And so we're going to start to connect it with you as well. So the question I have, though, is the difference in how the three of you speak about community engagement versus how it's spoken about in a formal sense, from government and from community engagement professionals. And one of the ways that just touched my heart was how much you talked about the healing power, the emotional resonance, the friendships, the relationships, the human needs that are met by a more democratic democracy. And so I'd love to have you say a few sentences more about that aspect of having a more inclusive and more just democracy.
Well, I guess I can start. I was thinking back to my early days with the Columbia Slough Watershed Council. Watershed councils were a new thing that the state was encouraging. They be formed around various water bodies. And the whole idea was that they would represent the various interests in the watershed. The Columbia Slough watershed is the smallest watershed in the state, but it's also the one with the most complex land use patterns and demographics and everything else. So to get these people together, and you've got the industry people, and you've got the airports in the watershed, and so you get these people together, and they have very different perspectives, and most of them have never interacted with people from the other part of that at all. So one of the things. It took 3 years. It was a very difficult process, and it almost fell apart several times during those first 3 years. But we went on bus trips, tours of various parts of the watershed together. We had meals. We had a number of things to help everyone understand the perspective of the others. And it was amazing. After a while, we would get to a point and a topic would come up and someone would say, well, we really need to have so-and-so here because that's something that they really know something about, and that's something where they really care about. So we began to kind of see each other's perspective and make sure that person, that if they missed that meeting, that we got their input before we took action. It took us several years before we took any action, and then the big debate on whether to put a sign marking the edge of the watershed council, and it was strange.
I'm pretty sure your middle name is Patience, Linda Patience Robinson.
Well, I don't know, persistence too. It got to a point where we had put so much time in that we didn't want to let the others. It's that whole thing about whether we should be collaborating or whether we should be holding their feet to the fire. That was the big discussion early on. Are we an organization that's there to make sure that those government people do what they're supposed to do, or are we here to try to help improve things by working together and finding a way we can work together?
That's a question for the ages. Thank you, Linda. Carol, and then Blanca?
Yeah, I really, I couldn't hold back the feels, and as you can all see, and just talking about the power of how when we make democracy and fashion it and design it to be more equitable than it has been in the past, it does have the capacity to heal and transform the experiences of people who live, learn, pray, play in our communities. And I know that firsthand. I think I touched upon the fact that, I had felt very othered growing up here and excluded. And you might ask, oh, well, why? Why? And I think it's been my lived and learned experience that if these processes aren't designed to include, then they ultimately exclude. And so when we think about engaging all of Portland, if we're not designing these processes to include all of Portland, including those who are low income, LGBTQIA plus communities, BIPOC communities, then it's not for everyone. And so, and that's so heartbreaking, right? That the people who make up these wonderful cities don't get to be included. And I also talk about the healing in it, in the fact that I'm, in my early 20s, and I've felt this way, right? That I felt the adverse effects of what it's like to be growing up in a society where for inclusion to be built in is not necessarily on the agenda. I mean, I think about people, grandmothers alive during times of segregation and things like that, and how we need to recognize that the pace of equitable change in our nation has been painstakingly slow. And as we make these new changes, we can applaud ourselves over and over again, but I think if we just rest on our laurels and look around and be like, wow, well, youth voice, youth vote, the first cycle, and so on and so forth, then we can get into a habit of just resting. And when we just rest and sit there and applaud ourselves, we're not moving forward. And, being a biology major and looking at how when we assess the health of a stream, one of the factors that we look into it is the velocity of the water, the flow of the water. And a stream that's not moving, that's stagnant with a velocity of 0 is one that's dead, is one that can't sustain the rich ecosystems there, right? And so, thank you so much. And so, yeah, I think when it comes to talking about discussions of healing, I've mentioned this process as healing, but if I just stay there and stop and be like, okay, I've healed enough, then no, we can't do that. And so as we've talked about this first cycle of Youth Voice, Youth Vote, just knowing that it's taken numerous years to get to this first cycle, and also that this money was funded by the American Rescue Plan Act, which is not a continuous stream of funding. It's been like a one pot kind of thing. And hearing how, right, this has been my experience, but also youth who are younger than me, share how, this has been like the best spring of like high school, or the best spring of middle school. And like, I don't want this to end. And we don't want this to be like a summertime, just a one-time thing. We want this to be institutionalized, embedded in our cities, because it deserves to be embedded in our cities. And not just this cohort of youth, but generations to come deserve to have their voices shared, deserve to have their voices listened to. And so we can't stop. So that's why we're trying to secure a second cycle, with the hopes that second cycle will lead to third, to fourth, which will really like lock in Youth Voice, Youth Vote, and participatory budgeting. And so honestly, I'm going to leave with just a little call to action that currently we're encouraging the Joint Ways and Means Committee, with co-chairs Sanchez and Steiner, to really just look at the incredible things Youth Voice, Youth Vote has done, and implement a second cycle. This needs to keep going. It can't just stop now.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. Blanca?
I think for me, the two main things that came to mind as you were asking, Wendy, was like, you need to make like these spaces fun for people. Like, if we're looking at communities who have historically not been in these like spaces of decision making, or government spaces, whatever we want to call it, for many reasons. Some because they don't even know that these spaces exist and that they can actually have the opportunity to participate. But then when they may show up and don't understand what's going on, or it's not accessible, or the meetings are kind of boring and just not fun to be in, or the information is just very challenging to understand and like actually like take in to fully participate, that really creates like challenges and lack of wanting to return to those spaces. So I think people, communities are very smart and hold a lot of knowledge. Just they may look different than the typical like professional expertise that other communities may bring, right? Or that your typical person who gets involved in these types of spaces brings. However, that is equally as valuable in those spaces. And so, in our work, we think about how do you break down a topic or a term or just general information in a way that makes it easy to understand, but not like in a way that makes someone feel like less than, because you can do that and you can find a way to do that. You just need to maybe work a little harder to do that, but you can. And also, like, again, like making those spaces fun. Like whenever we host, an event with youth or with adults, whenever we do events like this, or even our staff meetings or our cohort meetings with the youth, we're always doing fun, like dinámica type of activities, or, centering how are people actually doing, how are they walking into the space when they are participating with us. That like playfulness and like liberatory types of practices, and like being human-centered is what really brings people back into the spaces. And if organizations or government teams or staff are not too aware or familiar with how to do that, that might be an area where, there could be an investment in some sort of like professional development in a way that makes those spaces fun and that staff can actually implement that type of standard into the way that they do their job. Because ultimately, like, as staff, you all should enjoy your work too, as much as the community should when they show up. The other thing is, like, transparency is a big thing, right? And it's often tossed around in a lot of spaces, like, oh, we need transparency, and like how decisions are made, or what happens, and things like that. And bringing transparency into any type of community engagement space is key, because while there may be restrictions or constraints on, like, whatever the action item is, bringing that level of clarity to the community members who are involved is so much better than just simply saying, oh no, that can't be done. It's like, well, why can't it be done? Is it the ordinance, or whatever it is, but being clear around, like, what are those limitations and how can you work with those limitations in mind. Because, again, people are capable of understanding. It's just finding ways to lead with that information and then helping people through that process.
Thank you, Blanca. Let's show our appreciation for these wonderful Portlanders. Thank you so much. And with that exhortation from Blanca, it's time to eat and enjoy each other. We'll call folks back at about 7:15. And you can keep eating, like, just eat all you want, but we'll come back and maybe start talking to each other a little bit around 7:15. So we'll see you then. Thank you. So I feel a little like we're just rushing you through this, but we do want to hear from you, because everything that we do tonight feeds into tomorrow, that feeds into the next day. So we want to make sure that the collective wisdom of this room moves forward. So we've decided that we're actually gonna move straight to our activity, and this is Corey Misley, who is a project manager at Oregon Solutions, a dear colleague, and he's going to lead you through the exercise.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, welcome back, and you can, please keep eating, but start thinking. If you haven't been already, I'm sure you already have. This portion of the evening is all about reflections and idea generation. As Wendy mentioned at the beginning, we are going to hear, as we did, a wealth of expertise and experiences around community and civic engagement. And now it's time to flip the script a little bit, and at your small tables, spend some time over the next 15 or 20 minutes coming up with what 2 ideas you heard or can generate that your table thinks is most exciting for Portland to explore. And are there any questions or curiosities that you still have? Gaps that you've heard, unanswered questions, etc. Each table has a large piece of paper, so ideally capturing that on that would be great, like Wendy said, so that'll carry over into tomorrow and Saturday's activities. And for those on Zoom, you can put your questions or ideas or reflections in the chat feature. There's also some streams of engagement packets to refer to on the tables. So those could be helpful guides if you're looking for a little spark of interest or ideas. I don't think anyone will have a lack of questions or ideas at this point. And also, when they're finished with their food, we'll make sure that we can get our guest experts around to your table as well if you have a question or want to bounce something off them. So please just flag me down or anyone else you've seen facilitating today, and we'll get them to your respective table. I think that's it. We're going to take about 10 minutes once we finish this up at about 7:35 or so to do some share out. So be thinking and talking and asking us any questions if you have it along the way. Yes, and maybe separating questions and ideas would be helpful as well. Line down the middle of the paper. Awesome. Thank you. I'll circle. I'll circle. I'll circle. So let's take some time to share the ideas and maybe even some of the questions that you all came up with. There's folks on Zoom as well, so for their sake, so they can continue to participate in this process. If anyone wants to share, we have a mic here in the middle of the room. I don't think it's portable, so we don't want to mess that up. Is anyone interested in sharing some of what they came up with their table groups?
Okay, we got a group. We got a table. We got ideas. Okay.
So you have to come to the mic. No, you're okay.
So
That's fine.
It's just so our
Zoomers can stay included. You can. Why don't you turn it and face them? That's way better.
I can't take it to them though. So is it on? Hi, my name's Jenna, and I'm in this group right here. And we had some really cool ideas. Some of the things that we talked about were place-based solutions and having constant opportunities for cross-pollination. So we're doing place-based solutions and really meeting individual community needs, but we're also not in isolation, and we're making those connections that kind of foster forward movement and ideas and sharing out resources. Also, a standardization of best practices or smart practices that everybody, especially in governments, can use and connect with each other. So cross-pollination. What else did we have? Is that good? All right. That's weird.
Great start. Great start. Who else?
It looks like that middle table has something to say.
Yeah. Wonderful blinding light right here. It's a great spot. Anyone else? Gary, come on up. Come on, Gary. There's any way to deal with that sun.
Boy, yeah.
Welcome to the limelight.
I'm going to read this, or at least try to read it. Can you hear me? There we go. Include seniors and elders. May have different needs and have a lot of experience. Can be a digital divide. And that's, combine the youth with the seniors and come up with kind of a thing here. Change the way people testify at city council. There's a lot of people who can't testify. Current model doesn't work. And improve response times from the city staff by answering the phone and email or getting back to you within 24 to 48 hours.
Woo!
We've got some momentum generated. Who's hopping on? In the back. That's such a...
Oh, yeah, others.
I know, that's rough. Sorry.
Okay, so we talked a lot about, or the two ideas that we thought were really interesting to think about how Portland could enact. One was the citizen assemblies. It was really just kind of a inspiring talk and just thinking about how that might work here, along with the participatory budgeting. And then we talked about other input was, we talked a lot about the balancing act between like how much process is too much process, how slow can it go and still keep people engaged. We talked about that sort of themes that we heard earlier. And then how fast could it go and still people don't feel ignored or they feel heard. So making sure that that balance is there. How do we move to action? How much engagement is enough or too much? And then we also just had a little side conversation about the maze that is the city website and how it's so hard to find anything there. And then this one says, how can all government unify in, in the engagement process and frameworks. Yes, I think that was ours.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
I'm not bringing up our blank piece of paper. I swear I'll fill it out so that people tomorrow can see what we talked about. Our group, we focused a lot on citizen assemblies, but also talked about the cumbersome way of finding out what is going on with the city. So the website, different civic education tools, they're decentralized right now. So having a more centralized spot for people in Portland to be able to keep up to date and be able to decide maybe their level of engagement and having some more ways to build in more retention of people who do want to stay really engaged and maybe are shy or are unsure, and bringing them in with like big open arms of come in, this is how city processes work, things like that. So that's what we focused on in our group.
Show up and you have a bad experience, you're not getting back on the bus. And it's very much like that when you arrive in whatever setting that is.
Great.
Marianne?
My name is Marianne Schwab. I've been a neighborhood robo-browser now for about 40 years. I even ran for office to try to change this antiquated Jim Crow commission form of government from one by district. But I was only a secretary with 2 reams of paper and an ink cartridge. I didn't have the money to have the mailers and the signs and all that stuff. My sign was at the Copper Cleaners. And you should have seen my sign. It was right next to the Hot Lips Pizza. Boy, a lot of pizza people voted for me, 8,000. But anyway, you've got to have a little levity here, but if you think you're right, you've got to run. The League of Women Voters worked 2.5 years to come up with a plan how to run this commission form of government. And to her credit, our former Parks Commissioner, I'm having a brain hiccup, mailed a mailer to everyone just before we would vote yes, vote yes, vote yes. Somebody had tweaked what I wrote behind the scenes. So you really don't have any control. And I was really, really pleased here today for the young people here. It gives us hope. And the reason, it's just that Barbara Roberts said, always tell somebody who you are so they know that they'll pay attention. So enough of me. What I want to do as a retired school secretary with Portland Public Schools is I want to bring civics back to the classroom. I'm going to try to buttonhole with him again tomorrow, pretty hard in between salad here. And I do have a plan. I have a plan for everyone here. And please make a note. You can take a free class on the United States Constitution through the Hillsdale College. You can do it online, and it doesn't cost you a dime. I'd like to see the first primary grades learn the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to see our United States flags back into the classrooms. There's rainbow flags, there's this, there's everything, but no American flag in our primary grades. A lot of books are being destroyed. Why throw away Malcolm X? Why throw away the most popular book in the United States was, no, I'm too rushed here. But what I want to see, I want a map. I want to know, do we go to the State Department with school? Do we go to the teachers union? How do we change the curriculum so that the first 3 grades, they're learning cursive writing. Eventually they're going to sign to vote. No one's teaching cursive writing anymore. 4th grade, you learn about the wagon trains, the Native American Indians, and our salmon and our 1855 treaty to protect the salmon and their property. And the other thing then, up to the 8th grade, you learn who wrote the Constitution and why. And we could keep it. It's worked for 250 years. If we need to tweak it or something, then you've got a whole long list where you can add to it. And that needs to be also taught in the 12th grade before they graduate. This university has been passing these out for years, and they have been teaching, pursuing truth, defending liberty and justice since 1844. They got it right.
Hey, Marianne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
I can stop.
Also, with ideas and questions, because that had both ideas and questions in it, if you could write it on the paper, it'll be passed forward to the next group tomorrow. So anything that came up that you weren't able to say, that would be great. Corey, or you think you're ready?
Is there
one more?
Well, I think we got every table covered.
No, they didn't. They're slinking around back there.
Amy came up. Yeah.
Oh, were there 2 groups back there?
No, they were.
Okay.
They were one.
All right. Well, Sarah Giles, can you please put the address on the? We need the address here so people know what to do. So, a couple things. One of the things that we always end with is appreciations. And so I'm going to start by just saying I appreciate that you all came on the first sunny evening of the year, and you came to be with us, and so thank you very much. I also want to offer a specific appreciation to Blanca, who has now spent 2 weekends with us in a row, so I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Blanca. And we'll just want to, you don't have to come to the mic for appreciations. If folks want to offer appreciations on the, in the chat, we'll take them. But if anyone in the room would like to offer appreciations to individuals or groups of individuals, we'll do that before we talk about some of the logistics for tomorrow. Julia.
So I can't see any of you, but I know that you're there. So I want to express appreciation for our Portland storytellers. And so, as guests of Portland, we can offer what we know, what we've seen, but just hearing about what's going on says that you guys are doing a lot of best practices, but also, thanks to Oregon's Kitchen Table for valuing that knowledge and bringing it and putting it on equal footing. So thank you to everyone, but especially the storytellers and to Wendy and her crew. So
thanks, Julia. Anybody else have anything to offer?
This is coming from online. Nancy, who was joining us streaming, had an appreciation earlier saying, thank you, Linda Robinson, for everything you do. And I haven't gotten a chance to tell you yet, so I also feel the same way.
Anybody else? And of course, you can always offer private appreciations. You don't have to do it publicly. But I just, the spirit of the room was so nourishing. So thank you so much for bringing that spunky, joyful spirit, and hopefully it will continue on into tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll be back. Our guests will be with us. We're like a we're like we just travel now. We're like a traveling carnival at the moment, and we just jump out and take all of our stuff out. And tomorrow we'll be at June Key Delta, and as you can see, we had people RSVP in person because we were worried about enough food. I think we're going to have enough. So even if you haven't signed up for tomorrow, you can still sign up tonight, or you can just show up because we'd love to have you. And it's great to have folks who can who can talk about what happened tonight and carry it forward, because it's a sort of progressive, we're hoping it'll be a progressive space. And some of the details that we're starting to emerge tonight, people have a chance to really visit about. So we'll get to hear from our guests. We get to hear from a different panel of Portland's storytellers, and I know you don't want to miss that because they're going to be great too. So June Key Delta is a beautiful space. It's right next to Peninsula Park. It's on a transit line, so please come. That's it for now. Thank you. We appreciate you, and we'll see you tomorrow.